All right, folks, I believe it's time to go ahead and get started. We have a public hearing that will precede our regularly scheduled meeting. I will call the regularly scheduled meeting to order following our public hearing. This public hearing is for the stated purpose of sewer use and pre-treatment ordinance. The Greer Commission of Public Works adopted by resolution a revision of its sewer use and pre-treatment ordinance on January 28, 2013, which contains modifications to Attachment D, grease control strategy for food service establishments, now referred to as Attachment E, fats, oils, and grease control ordinance for food service establishments. Additionally, modifications to Attachment B, basic wastewater treatment charges, sewer service rates necessitated by changes to Attachment D were adopted. The Greer CPW sewer use and pre-treatment ordinance establishes purpose and policy to regulate the use of the public sewer system. Greer CPW has experienced problems in its sewer lines, lift stations, and treatment plants due to the increasing difficulty of collecting and treating fats, oils, and grease from food service establishments. As revisions to the sewer use and pre-treatment ordinance, the modified attachments B and D were approved by the Greer Commission of Public Works and forwarded to the Greer City Council. The modified attachments B and D were approved at first reading by Greer City Council at its meeting held on April 9, 2013. At that time, it's recommended that a public hearing be held to discuss changes to the ordinance and to receive public comment. Therefore, this public hearing will be held on Tuesday, May 14, 2013 at 6:30 at the Greer City Hall located at 301 East Poinsett Street. A full copy of the sewer use and pre-treatment ordinance, which contains Attachment D, fats, oils, and grease control ordinance for food service establishments, and Attachment B, basic wastewater treatment charges, sewer service rates may be obtained in advance of the public hearing by visiting the Greer CPW or its website at www.greercpw.com. Having duly called the public hearing to order, I am going to recognize some of the folks from Greer CPW. We appreciate Mr. Nick Stegall being with us, and Don Milner, who made the presentation in our last meeting, and asked Mr. Milner if he'd like to come to the podium to give us any kind of update or additional information in regards to the changes and modifications or questions that may have been raised at the last council meeting.
Okay, I have a little presentation here that I would like to show just so that everybody will kind of know what we're dealing with. And what I've got here is a sketch of a in-ground grease interceptor. This particular type of structure is located outside of the food service establishment, buried in the ground. Typically the sewer lines where dishwashing occurs go into this structure, and it'll come in on the inlet side. The food solids will settle on the bottom, the grease will come to the top. The clear liquid in between goes out these pipes here and up and over to the next section where the same separation process occurs. Over a period of time, the solids and on the bottom and the grease on the top will accumulate more and more until there's no working zone there anymore, and then you have to get this pumped out by septic tank haulers and start over again. But this keeps the fats, oil, and grease from getting into the sewer system and clogging up lines and causing expenses and spills and overflows. This is an example of the structure as it's going into the ground. You can see the holes there where the piping goes, and you can see the two sections. This is the piping itself. It's PVC, 4-inch diameter, and the water, like I said, comes in and goes down here, and then the clear part comes out these other two pipes and over. This is all you see. The rest of it's underground. You got two manholes, one on the inlet side, one on the outlet side, and then you've got two right there where those for clean outs for those two lines that are in the mid part of the structure. So that's the only thing you'll see. Now, this is an example of grease that's collecting as it enters the interceptor. It comes in through here and it goes down that line, and then it starts to build up. You can see it starting to flow. This is on the outlet side of it, and you see it's basically, this is what we would refer to as a kind of a clear, considering what it is. There's nothing accumulated on the top or anything, and you've got a liquid going out that's free of solids pretty much. This one here is an outlet side that's about ready to be pumped out. You can see the accumulation of grease around the edges there, and you see a little bit starting to go out, that pipe there, around those sides there. So it's ready to be pumped out because you're starting to lose a little bit of grease. This is one that hasn't been, it's overdue for a pump out. And you can see there's a lot of grease going out the line into the sewer. That's going to cause problems there later, sooner or later. Now, this is an example of an under-the-sink grease trap. These structures sometimes are approved for use in areas where there's not adequate room to put one outside under the ground. They work pretty much the same as the under-the-ground type, only they're much smaller and they require a lot more maintenance. You've got the two sections there, and what you do with that is the people who in the food service establishment, typically an employee, will just skim the solids off and dip out the solids periodically and keep it clean that way. But it's just something that has to be done much more frequently than the outdoor type in the ground. This is a grease recycle bin. Now, what goes into the grease interceptor or the grease trap is what's washed off of the dishes. It's food or in the food preparation part of it. It's just waste. It can't be reused. But if you have something like a fryer, a deep fryer, or something like that, you can reuse that grease, and then at the point where it's not reusable, you put it into this grease recycle bin, and a company, there's several companies in the area that will come and collect that, and they can actually clean it up and sell it for biofuel or other purposes. So this is an important part of the grease control program. This is where a large majority of the grease goes into the grease recycle container. So that's something that I, as a grease control inspector, want to watch very closely. Is are they using these? Do they have one of these containers, and are they using them? This is an example of some piping that is clogged up with grease. And you can see that over time it gradually builds up until it just completely clogs the lines. Now, when the lines are clogged up, it's going to either back up in the food service establishment, it can back up in floor drains or sink drains, and then you got a big mess on your hands. Also, if some of this will go through and go on down the line and clog up the line somewhere further down from the establishment itself. And when that happens, you wind up with this, sewer overflow. So you could have the grease, it may build up right after it leaves the establishment, or it may build up after it goes on down the line and then come out of manhole. And then you've got an environmental hazard there where it's coming out and leaking and going out on the ground. So that's what we're trying to avoid with this program. Now, let me just say too that the grease control strategy is something that's been in effect in the sewer use and pretreatment ordinance for many, many years. And all we're proposing here is just an enhancement of something that already exists. For instance, It contains all the elements of the current strategy, but with more detailed guidance to aid food service establishments and grease haulers in meeting the requirements necessary to protect the sewer system and the environment. Included in the proposed revisions are design and structural criteria for grease traps and interceptors. In other words, that there's specific language in there that tells exactly what kind of materials to use, sizing, dimensions, so that the establishments know exactly what we need from them. There's no guesswork on their part. They know what we need. Guidance in the proper operation and maintenance of grease traps and interceptors. Tells them once they've purchased something and installed it, how to operate it. I mean, there's instructions how this thing is supposed to be operated. And also it's instructions for the grease haulers, even in how to clean them out, as far as pump it down, scrape the sides, whatever. Just very specific instructions on how to clean them out. And then instructions for pumping and clean grease traps and interceptors. Also included are requirements for food service establishments and grease haulers to apply for and obtain permits to operate. There's no charge for the permit. It's just a mechanism by which we can kind of track what they're doing. We want to be sure, especially in haulers, we want to be sure that the haulers are reputable businesses that operate in our area, and we want to know where they pumped from, where they collected it from, and where they took it. And part of my job is to track that, where from the time it leaves the grease interceptor till the time it's disposed of, wherever. Make sure it's going to the proper locations. And then additionally, and only as a last resort, enforcement actions, including fines, are contained in the proposed revisions. Now, the current sewer use and pretreatment ordinance has general language that says any person who is in violation of the sewer use and pretreatment ordinance can be fined up to $2,000 per day. Now, this is much more specific. This has specific infractions and specific amounts, such as maybe if it's a minor infraction of some sort, we might charge them $50 or something. But this, let me stress too, that this is only as a very last resort that we would ever utilize that part of this proposed revision here. We're going to work and try every means possible to come to a solution between, if there are any issues that we're going to work together to work through this. And you know, everybody, I find that the sewer users, whether it be food service establishments or anybody else, everybody wants to do the right thing, or just about everybody wants to do the right thing. And so I don't see the enforcement actions being something that's going to be utilized extremely very seldom. People want to do the right thing, and that's part of what this proposed enhancement does. It tells them how to do the right thing, so that they're not out there guessing. I don't know if I should do this or that, or I'm not sure what he wants. With this, they know exactly what I need. And also, this would keep down costs. Greer CPW constantly searches for ways to better protect the environment and provide customers with exceptional sewer service at the lowest possible cost. Now, if we have sewer line backups, manholes overflowing on the ground, pump stations full of grease, treatment plant full of grease, then we've got to pay an expense to correct those things. Those expenses are paid for by the sewer CPW customers. So this this proposed ordinance would be very helpful in achieving our goal of keeping our costs down to a minimum, so that our customers' costs are at a minimum. And so that's the completion of my presentation. And if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate the presentation. Council questions of Mr. Milner?
Could you tell me where on your website that was available for people to go look at? Because I tried to find it and I couldn't find it.
Yeah, I apologize for that. That was supposed to be on our website. It didn't make it there. Sorry.
That's okay.
Is it available now?
I don't believe it is.
Okay.
But it's going to be very soon.
Okay.
And at the time that this was written, this introduction was written, I was under the impression it would be there, but it just didn't make it there. So.
Is there any increased new record keeping or reporting in these new regulations?
Yes. There is a quarterly reporting requirement where they'll just send me, I've got some forms, and they can just send me something that states that if they had a pump out done, what day it was done, and who did it, what company did it, and how many gallons it was. So that would be a quarterly reporting requirement there.
Any, I'll say restaurant, but I know it covers food preparation in a lot of different areas.
Yes.
If we have an existing business that doesn't meet these new standards, will they be required to bring it up to standard?
No, sir, no. What we want to do is with any new business that comes in, if it's a new place coming into town, we're going to require that they meet our specifications and get them started off on the right foot. But if it's somebody who's already here, we're going to look at them on a case-by-case basis. We're going to see what they've got at the current time. And if it's something that that we feel like is workable, then we will we'll consider what would need to be done to make it work. Like if it's a very say if it's a very small interceptor that is really sized way too small, then we might ask them to pump it out more frequently, or that's just an example. So we definitely will work with the existing businesses and with what they have. Now, if there are some out there that don't have anything, and there are some out there that have something that's unfortunately just completely inadequate, but there are some out there that have something that we can work with, and we're going to go case by case on that.
But the ones that are well below standard, you're probably going to lean on them to make changes?
Well, we're going to see. We're going to see if there's anything at all that we can do to help to. I mean, we don't want to put any unnecessary or heavy expense on the business. That's not what we want to do. And there may be cases out there where we may just have to tell them, I'm sorry, but you've got to have this or that. I'll give you an example of a recent one, and they normally I would if they were brand new and it was a brand new building and all, I would ask them to put something in the ground, but instead I said they could go with an under the sink 100-pound under the sink trap, and we would try that and see how that would work as long as they would maintain it on a regular basis, and I think it's going to work real well for them. So they spent less than $1,000. No, it was about $500, I think, for a trap. Whereas if they had put one in the ground, it would have been in the thousands. So there again, that was one where I felt like that maybe this would work to go in this direction instead of putting some kind of expense on them that might even possibly prevent them from even locating their business here. It just might just be probably too much for them. So, but I do believe in this particular case they'll be fine. It's just a matter of just keeping it maintained and keeping their records so that I can see by their records that they're maintaining it at the frequency that's necessary. So.
Well, and you hit the nail on the head. The reason I ask these questions is because I realize that for large concerns like fats or Chick-fil-A, this is old hat to them. They meet standards all over the country that are this strict or stricter probably. That doesn't bother them. But local people, especially older buildings that are upfitted, this could be a burden on them. And I know that when we do fees or millage increases here, we try to be sensitive to the increase to the customer. Do y'all run any kind of an analysis calculation of what this might cost a new business coming in with the new regulations?
A brand new business coming in, if it were if it were somebody that we needed like a 1,500, say a 1,500 gallon interceptor installed into the ground, probably between $5,000 to $10,000, depending on whether it's a traffic rated, or if it were not a traffic rated. That would be a large factor in there too. If it's,
What's a traffic rated?
meaning one that would be out in an area where cars are driving over, or if it's one that's off in a grassy area or something off of the road. So roughly, $5,000 to $10,000. And like you said, if it's one of these large chain operations, they do this all the time. They know, they have environmental staff, and they know what they have to do.
And I'm not so concerned about them as I am local business.
Absolutely.
I noticed on the application form, at one point, you asked for the number of employees, the number and times of shifts, hours and days of facility operation. Is that really important to know how many employees they have? I get into maybe prying a little bit too much sometimes.
Well, it helps in determining the size of interceptor or size of trap that they need. If it's a business that's new and they don't have any kind of water consumption record or anything that we can go back and look at, we kind of use that as to try to kind of roughly determine how many gallons of water we think they're going to use. That along with the number of seats in the restaurant, how many fryers they have, how many, just different. It's just all part of the equation.
I understand from the equipment standpoint. That'd be a good indicator.
So it's just a means of trying to determine to our best of our ability what size they need. I don't want to ask somebody to install something that's too large or too small. I want to try to get it right, and it's just information that would help me to make that determination.
To your knowledge, was CPW able to contact any businesses directly about this hearing?
To my knowledge, I don't believe so, because we really, my understanding is that this would be advertised in the newspaper or posted in the newspaper as a public notice, and also there are so many establishments out there. It's not just restaurants, but it's schools, hospitals, gas stations. There was really no way to determine all of them, and it's for sure that somebody would have been left out. And so from CPW standpoint, we didn't notify anybody. We kind of left that up to the city.
Well, the reason I asked is because the handful of businesses that I talked to had no idea. As of today, they had no idea. So the public hearing notification is inadequate for everything we do here. It always has been, in my opinion. But I know it's the one thing we do. But the people that I talked to were more upset about the way the entire thing was handled rather than the regulations themselves. They felt that they should have known about this way before now, and given time to look at this, which is all part of customer service, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, I agree.
That was their main complaint, was why am I just now finding out about this?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe that the thing that's required is a public notice in the paper, but I do agree with you that that's really not going to reach everybody. But the reason that we didn't try to contact everybody on our end was because, again, we were sure it was bound to happen that somebody was not going to be contacted, because it's just practically, well, I won't say impossible, but it's extremely difficult to pinpoint every single one that's out there that would be affected by this.
Well, I believe if you go back and check the minutes, I think that was a request made last time, was that CPW would contact customers.
And I would have to, that was a decision that was made above me.
Did you say that there were not going to be any increased cost to the existing customers? Is that correct? Unless they have to upgrade their system?
Yes, sir, that's correct. Unless.
What about the waste haulers? Or not the waste haulers, but the grease haulers?
No additional cost to them.
So they're already paying the $10,000 bond fee?
Well, that is an additional cost. You're right. But as far as the cost of doing business on a day-to-day basis, no.
Others? And you said last time that these regulations are not requirements of DHEC, they're just a guideline?
Specifically, it's not a requirement of DHEC. Where DHEC gets involved is if you have sanitary sewer overflows, if you have spills, overflows, then DHEC's going to come in and say, okay, now, how did this happen? Why did it happen? And then they're going to say, well, do you have a grease control program? And then if you say no, that's where you're in trouble. And so it's a preventive measure. It's a preventive program to keep things like that from happening. And every municipality that I'm aware of has some type of grease control program. So, I don't know of anybody out there that doesn't have one. I'm sure there's somebody out there, but
And we have one now, correct?
Sir?
We have one on the record now, right?
Talking about us?
Yes, sir.
No, sir.
I thought this was a revision of the existing one.
It is. It's a revision of the existing. We have an existing grease control program. It's been in effect for I don't know how many years. Many years. All this is the current the proposal just contains some all of the things that are in the all of the elements that are in the existing program, and with some more detailed guidelines as to what needs to be done and how to comply. And so it's no, it contains everything that's in the current program. Now, the current program has in past years has not really been addressed as it should have been, and that's one reason that I'm here today. I've been here with CPW for a little over a year, and one of my duties is to bring the CPW's grease control program up to par. But in past years, it has not been addressed as it should be, and so therefore we have some issues, especially in our sewer lines, our pump stations, and at our treatment plant. We're having to use a lot of chemicals to control grease in the treatment plant and pump stations. We're having to do a lot of pump outs at our pump stations, and this is a pretty big cost to CPW, and therefore it's we have to look at our rates to our customers, and we certainly don't want to. We certainly want to keep our customers' rates at a minimum, and but yet we're faced with some pretty big expenses due to the fact that this program wasn't properly administered in the past.
How many establishments do you think you'll have to, or will need to be updated or upgraded to this?
I can only estimate around 200, maybe 200 to 220, 230 maybe, something like that.
And they're going to need to install this new system in? What you're saying?
No, not necessarily. There will be some out there that whatever they have currently will be adequate. And there will be some who will have to make some improvements. So it's going to be an individual, case-by-case thing, really.
Mr. Mayor, is this proper time to ask questions as far as the ordinance goes, or should we wait till after the hearing when we get into the...
There'll certainly be time for discussion at the ordinance level. It is coming to us for a second reading, so we will have a chance to discuss it.
I have a few questions I just needed to have addressed. I didn't know if this was the time.
If it's germane to the conversation, you can. Well, let's see. It's an item of old business. We'll have it back. This is for comment. So at this point in time, I think if it's germane to this conversation, you may want to ask, but we will have it as a second reading under old business.
Well, it all applies to what we're talking about, but when we're talking about a new food service establishment, FSE, they have to apply for a permit with CPW. And I asked about this the last time you were here, and it doesn't look like there's been any changes made, and the application process is, the way it's written is somewhat open-ended or somewhat vague, and I think it needs to be defined because it says that a food service establishment must apply early on in the zoning process. That may be improper terminology that would, I mean that's something that probably needs to be looked at or changed, maybe permitting process. But my biggest concern with this is there's no time limit placed on CPW for approving a permit. It's very open-ended, and I know what you were saying, what you will do is to do your dead level best to look at it, make any kind of changes if necessary, and submit it or deny it, and make recommendations. But as we all know, things change, and you may not be here in 6 months, and someone else, and we as a city want to be very business friendly, and one of the things is doing things on timely manner, and if there's nothing that holds us to a prescribed time, then we can slip in being business friendly. So that's one of the concerns I had last time.
Actually, that was discussed after our last meeting. I brought that back, and it was decided that in order to make that change, we would have to go all the way back through the Board of Commissioners, the CPW Board of Commissioners, and have the whole program revised and reapproved again. Now, if you continue to feel strongly about that, then maybe that's what we need to do, but that's why it wasn't done.
We'll continue this conversation when we have time and old business to do that. Council, any other questions to Mr. Miller that might be most appropriately addressed in public hearing?
Well, I think one of the things that bothers me is if you have a public hearing, about something that's going to affect the business, and then nobody does anything to let the people that it's going to affect, let them know that we're having the public hearing. I mean, it's almost like you're having a public hearing, just for council and for CPW, and we left the people out that it's going to most affect. We left them out because if what Riley's saying, he talked to people and they didn't even know as of today that this was happening and running the business. I mean, when they start getting extra expenses like that, that's not being business friendly to me. I mean, people can deal with it if they know it's coming, but if you just drop it right in the lap at the last minute, the way the economy and things are now, I don't think that's right. I think if we're going to do it, then we need to somebody needs to make an attempt to let the people know, that it's going to affect that we're having a public hearing.
Mr. Miller, are there establishments that don't even have this at all, or are we just talking about an enforcement of?
Yes, sir. There are some out there that have nothing.
Okay. Yes. All right. Council, let's move to the public comment section of our public hearing, and then we'll move on to further discussion of this as we move into the whole business. As part of the public hearing, we will ask and recognize those that would like to speak in regards to the sewer and pretreatment ordinance to allow them to do so. And I will ask on a couple of occasions for folks to do that. It will give you an opportunity to participate in this public discussion if you would so choose to do so. With that, Mr. Miller, we'll move on to the public portion of that. If you want to stay fairly close somewhere, or at least where you can get back, we will address this in more detail. It looks like it's one of the first items of old business. But with the comments that have been made up until this point, by show of hand, is there anyone with us this evening that would like to address the sewer use and pretreatment ordinance? Seeing none, I'll ask the second time. Is there anyone who would like to address council in regards to the public hearing on the sewer use and pretreatment ordinance? Third and final request, by show of hand, is there anyone who would like to speak at our public hearing in regards to the sewer use and pre-treatment ordinance? Let it be noted for the record that no one indicated that they wish to speak at the public hearing. I'll pronounce the public hearing will be drawn to a close. Thank you, sir. With that, we'll move on to our regularly scheduled meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order. And with that, I will move to the invocation and ask you to join me in prayer. Most kind and gracious Heavenly Father, we are thankful for this beautiful day that you have provided for us, and thank you for the many blessings that you have bestowed upon us, your mercy and grace and love and forgiveness. We ask that you give us guidance and direction and insight as we move through the rest of this meeting. We thank you for the calling that you have placed upon our lives for public service. Lord, we thank you for the participation that we have been provided this evening by those that have joined us to take part in a democratic society. And we thank you that you have blessed us and allow us to live in a country that enjoys that freedom. We ask that you'll be with us through the rest of this meeting. We ask your blessings upon this community and thank you for all that you're doing here. We ask these things in the name of our Heavenly Father and Creator. And pray our blessings upon all these gathered. Amen. We have some visitors with us in terms of Boy Scouts, and it looks like a few Cub Scouts with us this evening, and so we want to recognize those folks. We've got Troop 41, and it looks like Mr. Glenn Davis leads that group, and Pack 241, and I'm going to assume Pack 241 is our Cub Scouts, and Tracy Davis leads that group. And what I would like to ask is that all the participants in Troop 41 and Pack 241, if you would, to please stand and let us recognize you. We'd like to do that. Go ahead and stand up there, boys. We want to thank you all for joining us this evening. Scouting is a wonderful program, and we encourage you to stick with it and utilize the skills, particularly leadership skills and community service skills that you will acquire during your time in scouting. And I thank you for what you're doing for our community. And if you would, I'd like to ask possibly some of our more senior troop leaders over there, to patrol leaders possibly, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance after I ask everybody to stand. Okay, if you all will do that for us.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all very much. Ms. Adams, do we have anybody that's indicated they'd like to speak in public forum?
No, I'm sorry.
Thank you, ma'am. We appreciate you filling in for Ms. Duncan this evening. And if I get names mixed up, you just go ahead and plow right on, okay? Not having anybody to appear in public forum this evening, I'll ask that you consider the minutes of the council meeting from April 23rd. They're contained in your packet. I'll entertain a motion that they be received.
So moved.
Second. I have a motion and a second in that regard. Any notes for the clerk? Hearing none. Ms. Adams?
Mr. Arrowood?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Ms. Booker?
Yes.
Mr. Dumas?
Yes.
Mr. Bettis?
Yes.
Ms. Albert? Yes. Mayor Danner?
Yes. We have a special presentation, and our rec department is going to come and give us some insight into a project that's been recently completed in our community that I think you will find interesting.
Evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for allowing me to update you on the progress of one of our hard grant projects. We recently completed the Century Park Disc Golf Course Bridge project. This one was a little bit unique in that we had so many partners throughout its fruition. SCPRT allocated us the funds through a PARD grant. The Greer Disc Golf Club provided us with engineered specs and drawings of the bridges. Our public service department installed the I-beams and the footings for the bridges. And the biggest contribution came from the Harley Bonds Career Center, Mr. Rhodes and Mr. Thompson and Mr. Bayer, and their students from the construction and machine tool class actually assembled these bridges on site. They took the wood at the school, cut it up, and came out to Century and put them together. Here you'll see a few pictures of the bridges, or the pre-existing bridges of the course. And these were put together by volunteers that participate in our disc golf course several years ago. And as the course has evolved and been redesigned and the wood gets a little bit older, it was time that these be replaced. Now you'll see a few pictures of the students from Harley Bonds actually on site putting the bridges together. And now you'll get to see the finished product, which is, if you get a chance to go out and check it out, it's absolutely amazing. In all, there were 4 bridges that were replaced throughout the course, and then even an additional bridge was installed. And this bridge right here, it's on hole number 16, is on the right of the bottom entrance of the park when you come in. It actually spans almost 90 feet. And this bridge is kind of the signature, or their footprint down there. That's on the right also when you'll come in. And the good thing about it is all of these bridges are now ADA accessible on the course.
Well, if I could, I believe we've got some of the instructors with us this evening. Richard Bayer, Roy Morris, or Scott Thompson, any of those fellows with us this evening. If y'all want to come on up, I want to have you join me. And if any of the men or ladies that are here, looks like mostly men, if you are here and want to come on up, just join us. Go ahead. Come on, fellas. Let's come on up. In around behind us here, and we'll get a picture. Right over here on this side, right here. Everybody. Do it like you do a bridge. Let's make sure we got it right on this side. Don't want it ending right there in the middle. Well, gentlemen, we are truly indebted and grateful to you for the work that you've done out at our park. As we saw from the pictures, not only is it very functional bridges, but very pretty bridges, and functional as well too. And so we thank you for all of your work out there, and we want to present you with a certificate of appreciation that says that this is indeed a certificate of appreciation on May 14, 2013. The City of Greer expresses its sincere gratitude to the dedicated instructors and students from the J. Harley Bonds Career Center for their talented and tireless work in constructing bridges at the Century Park Disc Golf Course. This partnership will serve residents of the City of Greer and visitors to the community for many years to come and has a direct positive impact on quality of life for all. And hopefully we've got all of your names on here, and this plaque will be yours to display at the Harley Bonds Center. And I would ask you to join me in giving these fellows a big round of applause.
In charge. My name is Scott Thompson, building construction instructor at Bonds Career Center. Mr. Baer is my partner in crime. We have AM and PM students here. The PM students were the ones that did the majority of the work out there. We built 4 bridges, and then we're commissioned to build an additional 45 feet to a 40-foot bridge, which was a challenge, and the guys came through with the challenge, and it was great. We were out there for about a month and a half. And then the morning class, where are you guys at? Braylon and Brandon, Julio, Carson, Travis, and Ethan, they're part of the group, but they built the arched bridge, which is pretty cool. So if you have an opportunity, go down there and look at the arched bridge. It's pretty neat. And they kept telling me, Mr. Thompson, I don't understand. How are we bending this? Why is it bending this way? Until we put the beams up, set them up, and they're like, oh, I understand now. So it was pretty cool. There are some great pictures, I don't know, Red, sometimes you can share too, with the installation of it. It was pretty crazy. We hauled it over on a trailer. We actually built it in the shop, and it's 20 feet long. So our trailer was 16 feet. So we had some hanging over, but they did a great job, and it's these guys. It wasn't me. These guys did all the work. So thank you for that, and we hope to continue working with Greer City. And we've already been asked to do some more projects, so it's great. It keeps our students involved in the community and in the process of giving back, because we're giving so much. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Our thanks as well to Ann Cunningham and her staff for helping coordinate that, and the folks from PARD. I know they were in town today, and I don't know if they've joined us this evening or already headed back, but we appreciate them being up today as well too. And our Public Service Department for helping in terms of their piece of that, getting the footings in and beams out. And so just a great example of a community effort, and one that will serve our community well and long. And if you have not had a chance to check out the park and or the disc golf course, I would urge you to go out and not only check out the bridges, but the other activities that are available in our parks. It is an activity that you may not fully be aware of, but I would venture to guess that anytime after about 4 o'clock on a weekday, and just about any time during the weekend that you're out there, don't just walk through the disc course without looking both directions, because there are going to be a lot of discs flying around out there. It is a well-used course, well-respected course, and we get a lot of use out of it, including tournaments. And so we appreciate the folks from Harley Bond working with us to bring this to fruition. We'll move to our administrator's report, and Mr. Greer, if you'll give us an update on that, please, sir.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. As we informed you earlier, we are prepared to begin the broadcast of our council meetings. Those are delayed broadcasts. Please be aware that those are scheduled for the beginning the Thursday following each Tuesday's meeting. The broadcast will be at 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. on 5 consecutive days beginning the Thursday following each of our meetings. Of course, that is also available on our website, and it will now be available on our PEG channels through our cable channels with AT&T and with Charter. We did take opportunity, following some recommendations from one of our recent meetings. It was recommended that we would develop some handout materials for people that may be involved in an accident here inside the city, to give them information about our record towing service. Those have been prepared. We've given samples of those to you at your desk, but those have been provided to all of our police officers. They have those in their vehicles, and at any time that a wrecker tow may be required, these will be provided to visitors and residents of our city alike. As some calendar items, do want to make you aware that our annual employee picnic is scheduled for Saturday, June the 1st. So we do hope you'll mark your calendars and plan to join us. We now have over 300 registered for that event. So we're looking forward to having our employees and many members of their families join us on that Saturday, again, June 1st. Freedom Blast will be coming up more toward the end of that month, but want to make sure you have that marked on your calendar as well. Saturday, June 29th is the date of our annual festival, our 4th of July Independence Day celebration. We call it Freedom Blast, but it'll be right here on the lawn of City Park, and looking forward to a wonderful, wonderful afternoon of music, entertainment, and of course a spectacular fireworks show to culminate the night. Our Municipal Association Summer Conference is being held in Greenville this year. We've provided at your space this evening some information for registration. Because the meeting is being held in Greenville, we did not include some additional information concerning housing arrangements. If you are in need of us providing any part of that meeting for any type of accommodations, just let us know. We'll be glad to coordinate that as well. We will be having a hospitality area that during conference sessions that you would be able to get a refreshment or take a break. We'll be making arrangements to have that at the host hotel as well, as we've done in the past when we're here in the Greenville market. But that will be coming up the 3rd week of July this summer. Several things did occur since our last meeting, and just want to highlight a couple of those. The mayor may wish to speak a little more on that a little bit later, but we did have an opportunity to host a delegation from China here. We had a great opportunity for them to come into City Hall, learn a little more about our community, what we are involved in from an economic development perspective, and it was an extremely beneficial time. Albeit the language barrier may have been a little bit difficult for us, requiring an interpreter for us to do that, but wonderful, wonderful feedback from our guests, our visitors from China that were here, learning a little more about upstate South Carolina, in particular our opportunity to share with them information about Greer and doing business here in the Greer market. We also conducted our Amnesty Day since we last met. That was very successful for us. Weather was a bit of an issue for us on that date, but we did have good participation. In the departmental report that will be in our next meetings package, you'll have some specific information about the volume of material that came through that date. We did also have the opportunity since we last met to help celebrate Greer CPW's 100th anniversary. We congratulate them on their 100 years of service here in the community. It was a wonderful opportunity for them to celebrate with the entire Greer community, but for us here at the city, it also provided us an opportunity to share and celebrate with them on that milestone celebration. And of course, as a community, we had the opportunity to participate with Family Fest this past weekend, weekend before past, and weather wasn't the most cooperative that it's been in the 29-year history of the festival, but there was a good turnout for them. They did have to call the event a little early on Saturday evening. Outdoor events, obviously we are subject to the weather, and this year was no exception. But I am told that that's a very, very seldom occurrence. They've been blessed over most of the history of that festival with good weather. But hopefully they're already making plans for next year, and the chances of that hopefully are now in the past. You did have an opportunity to see that we are doing some cross-training this evening, so you can see that Ms. Duncan has taken a side seat for us this evening as we're giving Ms. Adams an opportunity to get familiar with the municipal clerk functions, again providing some cross-training opportunities. So we do appreciate your understanding as we work through making sure that all of our folks are trained and we're able to keep things moving in case that we should need that at any time in the future as well. Those are the items that I needed to share with council this evening. I have no items to request of you in executive session, but we certainly will also be spending time at the conclusion of this meeting with the very beginning of our workshop on our budget for 2013-2014. Certainly available to answer any questions you may have at this time, or of course our staff is available to you this evening as well as any time outside of this meeting as well.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
As usual, Mr. Driggers and staff is available to answer any question or comment in regards to anything from our report tonight, and we appreciate the time in that regard. David, you're just prepared for the budget discussion. You don't have anything? Okay, all right. You looked kind of anxious there for a minute. I thought maybe you were waiting your turn at the podium. We will move on then to items of old business, the first of which is the second and final reading of ordinance number 12-2013. This is an ordinance to amend the City of Greer Code of Ordinances, Chapter 90, Utilities, Article 2, Sewer Use and Pretreatment, Attachment B and Attachment D. Mr. Pace has joined us at the podium, and I'll turn the podium over to him.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. If you will notice, this ordinance does have some significant changes to it between first and second reading. If I can familiarize you with this ordinance.
Mr. Pace,
Excuse me.
I think you're on the wrong ordinance, sir.
Am I in the wrong?
This is relative to CPW's...
I'm sorry. I do apologize. I was trying to make sure I had it up. He's ready. I'm ready.
We're excited and we're eager and we're ready to serve you. But we'll wait just a moment on that one.
Mr. Seifert, you are not the only one that appears to be a bit anxious. I thought we had a pitch hitter there for Mr. Miller. I didn't know where we were going with that. Council, this is the ordinance of which comes to you for second reading. Presentation was made at first reading. First reading is passed, come to you as a second reading. You have heard a second report by Mr. Miller and from CPW. At this point in time, before we open the floor for discussion, I will allow Mr. Stegall or Mr. Milner or any others from CPW that would like to give any oversight or further in-depth review of this to council to do so. Otherwise, we'll open the floor. Mr. Stegall, we'll recognize you, sir, and if you'll take to the podium.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was in the audience, of course, and heard the concerns of council, and would like to address those and maybe alleviate some of your fears. From what I heard, I wanted to offer to conduct a public hearing and attempt to notify anyone that we think may be affected by this ordinance. Be glad to do that. May use bill inserts. It's a little hard for us to schedule bill inserts. We have so many regulated, required notifications, but we will either put a notification in all 35,000 bills, or we'll come up with some way to identify people that may be affected by this, and we'd be glad if you require us to do that, to hold a hearing, additional hearing. I also heard a comment about the $10,000 bond. I think that's like a performance bond, which is part of a lot of different plan reviews and that sort of thing. I can't speak for our council, but since it looks like we're taking this back to our council, I'd like to recommend to them that we remove the requirement for a $10,000 bond, so I can follow through on that. And the other concern, I believe, if I understand it correctly, is a concern that if someone submits an application, that we get back, let's say, set a timetable of 10 working days to let them know whether the application is acceptable or whether we have comments, or maybe we'd like to see something different than what they proposed. But I would suggest that we accept a 10-day working turnaround period for that. So with those comments, I know it's up to you whether you would approve this tonight or not, subject to us following through with these commitments. But I'll leave that up to you, and I appreciate your time. Thank you, Mayor.
Right.
Be glad to answer any questions.
Okay.
I've got one final question. I've looked through this ordinance, and you have your non-compliance penalties, and that spells everything out based on the level, I guess, of non-compliance. But then there's other verbiage in here regarding the ability to charge a fine of up to $2,000. Would that be? I mean, where is $2,000 if you added so many of these levels together, it wouldn't exceed 2,000? Is that what that means, or is that another?
I think it's worded 2,000, up to 2,000 per day. Of course,
right.
We're subject to a lot of penalties like that from DHEC, and we don't intend to ever enforce a fine that high. We just want to get their attention. We want the changes to be made, and we want to do away with the effect that the grease has on our system. So
sure, I understand, and I'm just trying to find out where it defines why you would be charged $2,000, fined $2,000.
I don't think it has to be $2,000 to get people's attention. I mean, if
listen, I don't have a problem with it. I guess it's just going through ordinances time and time again. If it's not spelled out, then you might as well not even have it in there, because it'll be thrown out if it's ever challenged. And I don't find it in there as to why you would. You've got non-compliance penalties, but you don't have anything that says, okay, this is how we get $2,000, or why we would fine you. That I can see. That's what I was just trying to find in here.
I think it's a lot better defined now than it was previously. I think previously the wording was just that fines could be enforced up to $2,000 per day, and I believe, Don, that we've attempted to at least verbally describe what may be the level of fine for certain events.
Actually, the $2,000 is in the sewer use and pretreatment ordinance, not in the policy. It's in the body of the ordinance itself. It would apply to any industrial pretreatment facility as well as food service establishments. So it's not language that's specifically aimed at food service establishments. However, what we're doing with the proposed policy is to define specific infractions and specific amounts. So we're trying to make them get away from that general $2,000.
What was the section that listed the different possible fines and the different levels?
Let's see here. Attachment B, fees and charges, has the levels, and
but I think that the main answer to the question was that we were confusing the $2,000 with the pretreatment ordinance. Pretreatment ordinance addresses an industry that may dump something on us that would totally upset the plant and cause us to have a violation and cause some serious problems in the receiving stream. So that's when you get into the $2,000 type fines. Basically, with these industries, they're required to treat their wastewater to the residential level. In other words, if they have strong wastewater, if they have chemicals in their wastewater, they're required to treat it to the form that we can handle in our residential type treatment facility. But we did attempt in this version to spell out the levels of fines. Previously, it just said you could fine up to $2,000 per day.
Other questions? Comments? Council, in regards to offers that Mr. Peacock has made to proceed, I'll entertain a motion as to how to proceed on ordinance number 12-2013 at this point in time. I think we have a couple of options before us in terms of proceeding forward in terms of a second and final reading this evening, a tabling of action until such time as further comment can be taken from a hearing, or however you'd like to proceed. It does come to us for a second and final reading this evening, though. And to proceed with discussion, we'll need a motion of some variety.
If changes are made as far as taking the bond requirement out and having the permit time limit, that would require coming back for 2 readings again?
Yes, sir, it would. If you approve it and then changes are made, it would require 2 readings. If those changes are indeed going to be made and it affects your second reading, it may be more appropriate to table for second reading, allow those changes to be made, then the amendments would be inserted for a future second reading.
That would be my motion.
I'll second that.
Okay, we've got a motion to table the reading in a second. The floor is open for further discussion. In regards to his offer to set a time limit, does the city offer a time limit that we will approve permitting?
We do.
We do?
We do.
And that time frame is based on the type of permit, or?
Yes, sir. Typically, those would be 30 days. We have some that are 15, but most under plan review and regulated zoning, those types of things, we are required by statute to give a response within a certain time period. 10's pretty short.
I was going to say, is there some reason that we wouldn't want to align it with the city permitting process?
I have no problem with that.
Okay.
That was what was just offered. So if we want to do 30 days is fine with me. I just think there needs to be a defined time.
And I guess just to follow your line of questioning in regards to the bonding on the trucks, I mean, we certainly require bonding in terms of a lot of the processes that we engage with the community, and I'm not, while I might agree that it would be onerous to some extent if there is a situation where, let's say, one of these haulers takes a load of grease and drives somewhere and dumps it down a manhole cover somewhere back into the system, and there's not sufficient liability insurance or whatever to cover that kind of damage, would a bonding not be appropriate in some case?
That was not the purpose of my question. It was to make sure that all the facts were out, because we were told that the way all of this was written, there was no additional cost, where in fact there may be no additional cost for the food service folks, but for the grease haulers there are, and I just wanted to make sure that was put out there. I don't really have an issue with bonding. I think that's probably appropriate.
Okay.
The other issue was about having the hearing. I would like to see some type of outreach to the affected businesses, whether it's a hearing or notification. Go to this website, go here, and here's a copy of the. It was a little involved when I tried to guide people to it through our website. I mean, it's not just bam, you're there. You got to do this and this and this and this. I would like to see some kind of outreach before it's approved, so that everybody's had ample opportunity to look at it, understand it, ask questions, and get some feedback. Okay.
Well, along with the suppliers that are inserted, maybe in, I don't know if you can distinguish between residents and business when you're doing your mailings. If the insert, like you mentioned, was put in the mail. And then even if on our city website, if there was some way to get that information out, as well as having it put on the CPW website.
Well, you can actually, and I did this today, I had Kyle at Greer Development email the people of Greer Station that it would affect the restaurants down there. It was last minute, Jason's out of town, so people couldn't attend because it was last minute, but you could use them, you could use Chamber. There's a way to contact the businesses.
I have a motion and a second. Further discussion? Motion is to table second reading The motion is to table the second and final reading of ordinance 12-2013. I have a second in that regard. Any further comment? Hearing none. Ms. Adams?
Mr. Arrowood.
Yes.
Mr. Griffin.
Yes.
Ms. Bookert.
Yes.
Mr. Dumas.
Yes.
Mr. Bettis.
Yes.
Ms. Albert.
Yes.
Mayor Danner.
Yes. We move to the second and final reading of annexation ordinance number 1-2013. This is an ordinance that provides for the annexation of property owned by Bluff Madden Subaru Road Properties LLC located at 1770 Gibbs Shoals Road by 100% petition to establish a zoning classification of R5 for said property. Mr. Pace.
I'm back again.
Thank you, sir.
I do apologize for the earlier mistake. However, in this ordinance, there are some amendments to be made to the ordinance as it was originally submitted back in January of this year. Just again, a refresher, this is the little small house at the corner of Gibbs Shoals Road and Subaru Road that we had to kind of table this issue until we made some ownership clarifications in regards to this. This property has since been purchased by the developer of that community, Subaru Road Properties LLC, and it is part of that development as the structure itself will be removed. Kind of going through the ordinance, the exact survey has changed a little bit as far as acreage by reduction. The old acreage was without the road improvements that were there that SCDOT did in that intersection. So the new acreage reflects that reduction by taking up that much right-of-way on the property. And what we have also incorporated into the ordinance is the inclusion of the rights-of-way along Gibbs Shoals Road and East Subaru Road as an exhibit to that attachment also. And Mr. Drigger's clarification, I did speak with the attorney today in regards to this. There is one other thing that he would like added to it. If I could, at the whereas at the very beginning, Ms. Madden, if we could insert the previous owner and Subaru Road Properties LLC is the current owner. That was a recommendation also by the attorney. Not totally necessary, but he said it would hopefully make things a little more smooth. But the attorney was comfortable with this change and modification and amendment and said it was well within council's ability to approve this with the said amendments that we've requested.
Council, if I may, and just as a matter of clarification, one of the concerns that I raised at the staff level is whether or not this should be sent back for first reading. Since there was a transfer in the ownership of the property and it involved an annexation and the ownership of the property had changed, we were questioning whether or not that needed to occur. We did seek legal opinion, and again, we received the opinion that we could proceed to second reading. What Mr. Pace, again, is indicating to us is that we would offer as an additional amendment for the ordinance that you have at hand for second reading, whereas the former owner would be identified as the previous owner and Subaru Road Properties LLC as the new owner.
Correct.
That would be an amendment that we were requesting of you for second reading.
And previous owners identified as Mrs. Madden?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right.
That would still be correct. But he just thought that reference might be a good point to have in there.
Okay. All right. Council, before you, second and final reading of annexation ordinance 1-2013. I will entertain a motion that it be received with the amendment that the previous owner of the property be identified as Mrs. Madden and inserted into the wording of ordinance number 1-2013.
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I hear a second? I have a second. Floor is open for discussion or further questions.
I have one question that I wanted to ask. One thing I noticed on one of those forms, if I can get back to it now, on the number 1-2013, I believe it was, let me look at this other one, where it showed the property being purchased. I don't know who did that, but it was showing it was written out $60,000, but in the numbers part, it was shown $50,000. I don't know if that's something of legality that needs to be corrected or what.
That, I think that, I'm not sure exactly which document you...
It's right below the ordinance under Exhibit A.
Okay, that's part of the deed itself, and that deed would not be modified by
But
us. That's a
that's
recorded
nothing.
deed, no
Okay.
ma'am.
But you're correct, it is, it is conflicting.
Yeah, the attorneys didn't catch that.
And on this property, I know I'll bring this up every time we do something, and this is right next to the elementary, Woodland
Yes,
Elementary.
ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
We will be having sidewalks.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Others? Hearing none, Ms. Adams?
Mr. Airwood,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Ms. Bookert,
Yes.
Mr. Dumas,
Yes.
Mr. Bettis,
Yes.
Ms. Albert,
Yes.
Mayor Danner.
Yes. Council will move to item 3, second and final reading of ordinance 15-2013, an ordinance to change the zoning classification of property owned by JKM Properties Incorporated located at 118 Morrow Street from R12 residential to a DRD. Mr. Pace?
Yeah, Mayor and Council have no new information in regards to this, except that the public hearing was held. No one spoke in favor or in opposition to this request, and Planning Commission did unanimously approve recommendation for this.
Council, you've heard the recommendation of the Planning Commission. I'll entertain a motion to receive. So moved.
Second?
Have a motion and a second. Further discussion? Questions of Mr. Pace? Hearing none, Ms. Adams?
Mr. Airwood,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Ms. Bookert,
Yes.
Mr. Dumas,
Yes.
Mr. Bettis,
I recuse myself.
Ms. Albert,
Yes.
Mayor Danner.
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Thank you, sir. Council will move to items of new business. First item of new business this evening is the 2013 COPS hiring grant. Chief Dan Reynolds is requesting approval of 2013 COPS hiring grant. There's an attachment there in regards to a pre-application for 3 new police officers starting in fiscal year 2013. Chief?
Yes, sir. What we're asking for is permission to apply for a grant that would take effect in October of this year. The total cost of the grant would be $452,624.43. That's our estimate. It would cost the city over a 3-year period, and it would cost the city approximately $113,000 each for that period of time. Each year it would cost the city about a little over $37,000. The idea, the issue we have here is the city growing with the inland port. We're not sure what's going to happen, spurt of growth there, and also, as you're aware, there are many new housing starts that will begin here shortly, both close but in a distance, and we may need to increase our force sometime in the near future, and I think it would be better to do it now than wait. It takes us maybe 8 to 10 months to get an officer hired and on the street to operate solo. So we're requesting permission to apply for this grant. We can't guarantee we're going to get the grant, but we would like to apply for it. And it's a 25% our funding. Pays benefits and salary.
Council, questions of the chief?
Chief, is this, if we are awarded the grant and something dramatic happens to the economy or all of the development just ceases and the need for the additional officers no longer there, are we obligated by the grant to accept it?
Once we obligate ourselves, yes, we are. But I'm confident too that with our, we have 1-2 people on average that leave a year, that over a period of time we could make the adjustments to do
Chief, do we currently have anybody on staff that is under a COPS grant?
That grant has recently expired, and they are on their 1 year of employment with us today. Now, we're up to a strength we were when I first came here with 52 officers. We actually civilianized one position for victims assistance. We have 52 officers as we did like 8 years ago. But the city is growing in population, not only the residential population, but the number of businesses bring in more people too that visit this city. I'm sure you're aware of that. And that also increases our response.
452,000, is that salary and benefits calculated, or just?
Yes, sir. That's everything at current today's cost, with a little bit of estimate of what that increase may be. Again, we're just asking permission to apply.
I'll make a motion, we grant permission.
Have a motion, do I hear a second?
Second.
Have a second. Any further questions, discussion? Ms. Adams?
Mr. Airwood,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Ms. Booker,
Yes.
Mr. Dumas.
Yes.
Mr. Bettis.
Yes.
Ms. Albert.
Yes.
Mayor Danner.
Yes. Chief, just stay close, I believe. We have the second item before us this evening, the juvenile housing reimbursement agreement, and you can give us some information in that regard, sir.
Basically, the Greenville Corrections has established a new juvenile holding facility, and they're going to charge us the same thing they would charge at the adult facility for holding a juvenile, which we would pay if we had to carry them all the way to Columbia, which we're doing now, if we have to hold them. Not only that, but this facility will provide other treatment options besides just detention. So the length of stay should be shorter than it has been in the past. But we'll be charged at the same rate that they were before. Again, we get charged from Columbia too for the prisoners they hold there. So it shouldn't, it may even help us in the long run as this facility.
Council questions of the chief? Comments? I'll entertain a motion to receive.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion in that regard? Hearing none. Ms. Adams?
Mr. Airwood,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Ms. Booker,
Yes.
Mr. Dumas.
Yes.
Mr. Bettis.
Yes.
Ms. Albert.
Yes.
Mayor Danner.
Yes. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Don, if you'll hold up just a minute, I know you're eager to get started on the traffic calming policy. We've got a room full of folks ready to go this evening, but I do anticipate that we will have some discussion and questions in that regard. We do have a couple of annexation ordinances here, and with respect to those folks that would have to stick around a little bit to wade through those after our traffic calming policy, I'm going to just jump ahead here and take care of some annexation issues, and we're going to come back to our traffic calming policy. So if you can keep calm over there, we'll move on to some annexation issues, and then we'll come back to our traffic issues. So with that, thank you folks for joining us this evening. We appreciate it. With that, then we're going to move to the first reading of annexation ordinance number 16-2013. This is an ordinance to provide for the annexation of properties owned by James Stevens McAbee, Sabrina Ann McAbee, and Sandra Harvey McAbee, located at East Circuit Road, by 100% petitioning to establish a zoning classification of R12 for said property. Mr. Pace?
Mayor and council, as you'll notice on the exhibits, that this does include 3 tracts of property, 38.79 acres. For this is a proposed single-family development that would be on East Suber Road. Property does, however, contain some floodplain on the back, or the lower half of the property pretty much is encompassed in floodplain along the river there. But applicant is asking to have this annexed into the city. Planning Commission will hold a hearing on this Monday, this coming Monday, and we'll review all comments at that time.
By show of hand, is the owners, or representative of the owners of the property with us this evening? All right. I'll be back to you in just a second. Questions of Mr. Pace? Council? Sir, any comment that you would like to make this evening in regards to the property or to the request for annexation?
Not at this point.
Okay, thank you. I'll entertain a motion to receive.
So moved.
Motion.
Okay, got a motion and a second. Floor is open for discussion.
This property, I believe I read it correctly, it's right there on the corner of Hammett, or right down from Hammett Bridge, across from Riverside High, is that the?
It's not on the corner, no ma'am.
It's on down a little bit.
It's
Yeah.
on down by the
Okay.
other townhomes there on the right.
Next to Riverside, yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Do we know anything about who is going to construct these, or what price level they will be?
I do not have any of that information. Beeson Homes, Mark III Properties, I think, is the developer for this particular piece of property.
Who was that, I'm sorry?
I think it's Mark III Properties.
Mark III, it's not Beeson Homes.
Okay, Mark III Properties, I'm sorry, is the developer of the property out of Spartanburg.
Others? Ms. Adams?
Mr. Airwood,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Ms. Booker,
Yes.
Mr. Dumas,
Yes.
Mr. Bettis,
Yes.
Ms. Albert,
Yes.
Mayor Danner.
Yes. Council, first reading of annexation ordinance 17-2013, an ordinance to provide for the annexation of property owned by James Stevens Maccabee located at 741 East Super Road by 100% petition and to establish a zoning classification for R12 for said property. Mr. Pace?
Again, Mayor and Council, this property is contiguous to the other properties that we just annexed. This was a smaller portion where a single-family residence was established prior to being demolished here recently, and one of the owners is the same as the other owners in the previous annexation, and would also like to bring this into the city for the same development, or as a part of the same development that the previous ordinance addressed.
Council, questions of Mr. Pace? By show of hand, is the owner of the property or a representative of the owner of the property with us this evening? For the record, let it know that it was indicated affirmative. Would you like to add anything to the conversation in that regard? And that he chose not to speak. I'll entertain a motion to receive.
So motion.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Further discussion? Questions of Mr. Pace? Hearing none. Ms. Adams?
Mr. Airwood,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Ms. Booker,
Yes.
Mr. Dumas,
Yes.
Mr. Bettis,
Yes.
Ms. Albert,
Yes.
Mayor Danner.
Yes. Council will move to the first reading of annexation ordinance 18-2013. This is an ordinance to provide for the annexation of property owned by Rolling Hills at Willow Creek Phase 2 LLC. Karen Jimmy Cox located at 1705 Abner Creek Road and 0 Abner Creek Road, 100% petition, and to establish a zone classification of R12 for said property. Mr. Pace?
Mayor and Council, this property is located on Abner Creek Road. This is close to or as part of the intersection of D. Young Road and Abner Creek Road. This annexation is for approximately 34 acres of property for said development of single-family residential construction with a zoning classification of R12. This also will be heard at the Planning Commission on Monday in regards to the public hearing and Planning Commission input. For this will again be approximately, I think it was 94 single-family residential units just west of the Abner Creek Elementary School.
Floor is open for questions of Mr. Pace.
Glenn, as far as services to this property, is that, I'm assuming that's still within the Pelham Batesville district? Is that
Yes,
correct?
sir, it's within Pelham Batesville. We do have contiguity already to the property, and sewer is to the property already. So in order to attach to the sewer, it is seeking annexation, and it is infill development in regards to that.
Contiguity is a right-of-way strip?
Yes, sir. That comes off of one that came down to the...
It's not a right-of-way, because we don't annex off right-of-way.
It was fee simple.
Exactly, it's proper,
Yes.
correct.
Fee simple purchase of the sewer and dedication for annexation. This is the same sewer line that services the school.
Mr. Driggers, have we had conversation with our fire chief and the Pelham fire chief as to the growth of that area and what we are expecting, obviously now, and are we talking, because I know we have some joint response, we have other contract, so everybody's on board with what's going on?
We have communicated, and they understand that that area is anticipated to be one of our highest growth areas over the next 10 years. And was part of the discussion when we just renegotiated our agreement with them as well.
By show of hand, is the owner of the property or representative of the owner of the property with us this evening? Thank you, sir. Let the record indicate that so noted in the affirmative. Would you like to speak in regards to this annexation? Thank you, sir. Entertain a motion to receive.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Further comments, questions? Hearing none. Ms. Adams?
Mr. Airwood,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Ms. Booker,
Yes.
Mr. Dumas,
Yes.
Mr. Bettis,
Yes.
Ms. Albert,
Yes.
Mayor Danner.
Yes.
Does that conclude on?
It does.
I think that does conclude.
That's all I've got, sir.
I'll have one next month.
All right. We appreciate
For
it.
next meeting. Thanks, sir.
With that, Mr. Holloman, we will move to the first and final reading of Resolution 7-2013, a resolution adopting the City of Greer traffic calming policy. There is a good bit of information here relative to the traffic calming policy. I think I will turn the floor over to you, Mr. Holloman, at this point in time to tell us how we have gotten to the point that we are and the recommendations that will be coming from staff in that regard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a continuation of a subject we've talked about in the previous meeting and other conversations with various members of the council in between. But from the initial meeting that we had, I tried to make this policy much simpler and address some of the issues that were brought up. And in doing that, what I've done is I've taken out some of the fluff, if you will, and made it as simple as I think we can, based on some other ordinances, for neighborhoods to show their interest in dealing with this issue and how we would make that happen. And that we suggested that in order to initiate the program, neighborhoods simply has to have 5 households represented. They can make the request to my office. And once we confirm that that is the case, we'll then collect traffic data necessary to make the judgments as to what's going on in the neighborhood and does it meet the criteria. It has to be a residential street, it has to have a speed limit of 35 miles an hour or less, 2 lanes. The 85th percentile speed must be 5 miles per hour over the posted speed limit, whatever that is. And there's some volume issues there. If they meet those criteria, then we ask the neighborhood to develop a petition that represents 65% of the households in the area that's impacted to be in favor of it. And if they are, then we'll proceed with the program. We put some design criteria in here, what types of speed humps would be placed, some criteria about relation to driveways and intersections and things of that nature that always come up as we go through this process. One of the issues that invariably comes up is neighbors do not want one in front of their house because it's noisy, it's obnoxious, I gotta put signs up, things of that nature. So we have to have, concurrence from the neighborhood that these things are acceptable, and then we proceed with it. Funding for these facilities, we have discussed that in previous meetings. I think in the upcoming budget, there's some suggestions that there's funds be set up by the city to participate in this, and those will be used on a first-come, first-served basis if they're set up. And if those funds aren't available, then the neighborhood has the option of funding it themselves. So, that's kind of an overview of where we're at. We think still we're at the process where cost-wise, we're talking about probably on average a couple $1,000s to do these. We find very few jurisdictions that do less than that. It's not unreasonable, but there's always a cost associated with it, either through public funding or through the neighborhood. That's a brief overview. If we've got other questions or concerns, I'll be happy to try to address them.
If one thing I wanted to ask you, if some of the guidelines aren't met, like the percentile and the number of cars on that particular road, if the neighborhood elects to go ahead and pay for them themselves because of their concerns, would this be an option for them?
Not unless the guidelines are met. That would take away from doing a resolution or having a policy.
Well, yeah, that's why I was saying if the neighborhood elects to pay for them themselves, not coming out of the city funds.
I think the guidelines and the policy should still be held to, even if the neighborhood chooses to fund it. I think those are reasonable guidelines. They're very consistent with other ones that we see across the country and in the state. So I would not suggest we deviate from them.
Mr. Don, how do we come up with the 400 cars per day on there?
Most of the ones that I see have a minimum of 500, and there was some concern at the last meeting that might be a little high, so we lowered it somewhat.
But you said that's on a case-by-case exception.
I think we said that last time. I don't think we said that this time, did we? I don't think that's just one of our criteria.
They have to meet that.
Well, then what's the limited case-by-case exception? If you're gonna make an exception, what's the exception gonna be? A lot of streets don't have 400 cars.
I don't have an exception on this. That simply is the criteria.
But that would do them good.
It's a policy that you can adopt. I'm giving you my recommendation, and I'll certainly accept that.
If it's 400 cars a day, you said 400 cars a day, then most of the streets that we need the speed bumps on are out right off the bat. And that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for something on some of the streets that go through our residential neighborhoods that we can, get a policy to put in place. That's, 40 cars, that's a lot of cars.
Let me tell you what I found is recently, because I've got a constituent that's the mayor aware of this, and so is the police chief, but it's Cannon Avenue, and the police department has done, I believe, 2 traffic studies, but in a month's time, the street carries 70,000 cars. And so I think you may be surprised, because I couldn't believe that. And so you may be surprised that 400 actually may be too low as a standard. I don't know. But that leads me to another question, because you know how here in South Carolina the state has a lot of roads, and no exception here in Greer. How do we, or can we, deal with state roads such as Cannon Avenue if that was a route we wanted to take? Does the state allow, or do we have to go in and ask for special permission, or how does that?
You'd have to ask DOT's permission to do anything on the road. Anything we try to do on a DOT controlled roadway you have to get their permission.
The policy is recommended would only apply to city streets. We would have to make requests, and then we would have to meet the criteria that they establish to do any type of traffic calming on a state street. It's very likely that even if we were to meet their criteria, then we would be required to pay or to install it ourselves. The likelihood, can't say never, but the likelihood that SCDOT would allow and then would pay for that installation, I think would be unlikely. The hurdle of getting their permission would probably be our task, and then paying for it would certainly be our responsibility.
Sure. I mean, I would expect that, but what, I guess this is a kind of deviating from what we're talking about, but if we do have constituents that say, my street needs some sort of traffic calming device, and we find out it is a state road, what's the likelihood that the state would say yes?
Not impossible, not easy.
They've got their own criteria.
And it's much more difficult than what you see before you here. 400 would, it's going to be the 70,000. I mean, their criteria will be extremely high.
Well, my concern is that there's are smaller subdivisions that really don't maybe just have like one main road going through and then one, road to the left or whatever, that don't really have that big of residential.
It's all a question of how small a neighborhood you want to include or allow to be included in the process. And I'm not trying to take away from the size of the neighborhood, but if it's a program that you intend to implement, there's a matter of scale of how many roads that you want to put in the pot that you might could have this on.
Right, and I guess that's one reason that I also brought up the fact that if a residence did not meet some of the criteria and their HOA wanted to pay for it, would that not be something that could be permissible? Or?
Well, the issue is they're your streets. You regulate them. This is a regulatory issue, not a funding issue. It's a matter of whether or not you choose to allow or not allow that in your regulatory authority over city public streets. That is council's discretion.
I'm talking about residential.
But they can't do anything without your permission on a public street. You regulate that street.
Okay.
Whether they pay for it or they don't. Or if it's a private street, it's not us. If this is a gated community and a private street, we don't.
Different story altogether.
Different story altogether. But if it's a public street, the regulatory authority of the rules for that street rest with city council.
The cost of these, you're going to have to put up some signage, right? Warning people.
Correct.
That's included
the standard signs, speed hump, whatever. It is not an extensive amount of signing. A little bit of pavement markings and a couple of signs, but it goes along with the installation. That's right.
And I've just got a technical question. Why is this a resolution rather than an ordinance?
Policy.
It's a policy. It's not a law. That's the main reason.
Mr. Holloman, if the cost of the recommended calming device is similar to a more permanent asphalt device, why have we chosen to use the removable device?
Well, it's my suggestion more than anything else, and it's my suggestion because they are removable, and as we go through maintenance cycles and other things, you can take them out and put them back in.
I was told that asphalt was extremely more expensive.
Asphalt is about in the same ballpark. They're not drastically different, but they're, depending on different things, there will be some difference in some cases. But they're removable. We can take them out and do maintenance, and then you can put them back in, and so they're flexible. You can change the size. You can do different things with them. It gives you some options that you don't necessarily have with asphalt.
All we're discussing here is speed humps or bumps or whatever. Are there other kinds of means to slow traffic, like narrowing streets or or if you put some sort of planters in the middle of the road, which actually narrows the lanes, does that cause traffic to generally slow?
That is a part of what's considered traffic calming. The devices that I'm suggesting from Traffic Logic give you the ability to do that. One of the ones that they cite as an example places a more narrow structure, if you will, in the roadway space such that fire trucks can straddle it, but automobiles cannot, and things of that nature. They also allow you to assemble those devices in different ways that make the lane more narrow as you come to a certain point, which is a choker, if you will. Things of that nature can be done with these same devices, and so you get some flexibility in how you use them. But yes, you can do other things with them, and those are considered part of the traffic calming toolbox, so to speak, for neighborhoods.
Well, maybe I understand that. That's not I guess the question I had is if you had a street with an issue, instead of putting a speed hump or bump or these obstacles that you kind of have to maneuver around that are still items that you drive over, does it help if you do, I guess it would be more streetscaping, when you do put in islands, and I know that becomes an issue with people crashing into them, but I mean, does that help slow traffic?
Each case will be slightly different. Can it do that? Yes. Will it in all cases? You have to try it and see.
Well,
but a lot of neighborhoods do use chokers and other things like that in some manner, either permanent curbs or otherwise, to in fact make a specific area a little less traversable at a faster speed that becomes traffic calming. So yeah, they're all available. And as far as I'm concerned, any of the neighborhoods, if we choose to develop a policy, one of the things we will do, once we determine that it meets the criteria, we'll meet with the neighborhood, and if some other option that's viable is felt more appropriate, then we certainly can do that. It doesn't have to be a bump.
Well, I'm glad you said that, and for the record, I've got to say this because I made a call to a company in Greenville who they've done a lot of work putting pavers in as far as streets. And it's Campbell Tile, and I just had some questions for them. They spent a lot of time with me today on the telephone, and they did not have to do that, so I just got to mention them and thank them. But we have neighborhoods that, different needs and different things that they want, and they want things to look differently. But they have a speed hump that actually you have an on and off ramp that's asphalt, but then they come in and they put the pavers in. And so that's just an option that we can put in our, if we so choose to have a policy, just a tool that we could throw out if the neighborhood wanted something a little different, and we probably would ask them to pay for the upcharge on it, but that runs about $15 a square foot, but they would want us to provide, the street cut to their specifications, and then the asphalt is to run up to it. But anyway, that's just one of the options that's out there.
No, like he says too, I think each neighborhood is going to be different, and it's not going to be where it's one size fits all. Which are back to the 400 vehicles a day. We can change that number.
It's your policy.
Yeah. And I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying about you want to get it to where you got some criteria in that. But I mean, in certain neighborhoods where it's not reaching 400 cars a day, but they're still having a problem, I still want to be able to help those residents out. Even if it's not meeting the 400 vehicles a day. Case by case.
Could we change that to 2?
It's a question of whether you want a policy or whether you want something that's so flexible I can take it anywhere I want it, and that's your choice.
No,
that's council's choice.
I'm not looking for something that's so flexible that you just, there's no need to have a policy. I think we need to have a policy, but I think we need to be smart in having our policy, because, what difference does it make if the neighborhood's having a problem on a particular street and they only got 200 cars a day that go down that street, but they still have the same problem as somebody that has 40 cars. If a child get hit, that resident or that person in that community is not going to care whether it's 200 cars a day or versus 400 cars a day. What they want to do is slow that traffic down so that it's, people can use that neighborhood, especially in my neighborhood. We particularly have a lot of foot traffic, and there's not a lot of space. Like you got 2 lanes wide. I mean, are you saying 2 lanes? Because we got streets that got where 2 cars can pass by, but I'm not so sure it fits 2 lanes wide, because
we have streets of varying widths.
Yeah.
We're not going to split hairs of whether it's this width or that width. If it's two-way traffic on the street.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the issue. We got two-way traffic.
Because we have some streets that are clearly single-lane streets.
Exactly, yeah. I agree. You got some that are small, not regular.
But traffic regularly travels in both directions.
And I think the main purpose there was not that we just identified 2-lane streets, that we're not going to put this on multi-lane highways and things of that nature.
I'm talking about neighborhoods. I'm not talking about,
That's all we're talking about. Wade Hampton or other, right, exactly.
Poinsettia or Wade Hampton, I understand that.
I mean, we do have a few one-way streets around, which I think could be eligible for this if they meet the criteria. There's nothing that says just because it's Cary Street, 12th Street, there's a number of them. There are a relatively small number, but they are one-way.
And to the grade, I mean, how can I tell what the grade on the street is? I mean,
that's what we'll determine. We have fairly few who are greater than that, but we do have some that have some steep grades on. So we will do that's part of our criteria of going out and making those determinations.
Because the only street that I can think of that I have any concern about would be Forest Street. And I don't know what the grade on that is.
There's elements of it that are greater than 5%, I suspect, but there are parts of it that are not.
And see, that's what Congress is too, is that where that hill is, they're coming down for that. I mean,
And on grades,
when they come to the stop sign, you can see. When I walk the streets and that, I see them. They come to the stop sign, they don't even slow down because they know they're getting ready to go down the hill. And that's a problem.
And
that might be a greater than 5%.
One of the reasons these types of devices aren't put on hills like that, or not recommended for that, is the severity of what the results of hitting one of these is if you're going down a steep grade.
Well, that's what I want. I want you to know I got a problem if I hit this bump. I got a problem. That's what I want.
You veer off and go into a house or another structure.
Well, I think what it does is it slows the traffic down. If I know I'm going to be hitting my car like that, I'm going to slow the traffic down. Because right now, without speed bumps, they already veered off and went into a house. On Forest Street, veered off right off the road, no bumps, no nothing. They just would not stop for the stop sign and ran into the side of the lady's house. Ran through the fence and ran into the house.
The caution that I would ask council to consider is keep in mind that when you adopt a regulation on a highway, there is inherent liability that's going to be there as well. And one of the standards of that liability is going to be the decision that you make based on accepted engineering principles. And if there's an accident or there's an injury and we have not done that under what may be considered standard or acceptable engineering principles, then our liability could be substantial.
I mean, I'm already having cars that are running into houses now. You know what I'm saying? I know what you're saying. They're running into houses right now. We have one that runs into the house on Forest Street.
My responsibility is to make you aware.
Yeah.
The action that you take is...
Because, I mean, I know what you're saying, but I'm saying I'm already having somebody run into, without speed bumps, somebody run into a house, tore the fence down, ran right to the side of the house. Missed that gas line by just a hair. I mean, we were fortunate they didn't hit that gas line, because I don't know what would have happened then if they'd hit that gas line. That might have been, I just want something that slow the traffic down. And I know what you're saying about it's on the hill now, but I want something that if they hit, then they'll, hey, I got to slow down. Basically, what I think is going to happen is a lot of that traffic that I got is going to go over to the other street, which is fine by me. You know, because it's better to sooner down that traffic anyway, because there's a lot of businesses and stuff on there. Get it out of the resident. Or they do come through slow down.
And all I can say is that this is a policy the council has to adopt. It's a policy council has to live with. I'm not aware of very many that have been adopted that can absolutely say it eliminated this problem totally.
Yeah. I do have one question about liability. Because if we set out the standards and then we ask our city engineer, who is qualified as a professional engineer, to engineer that, something happens that's negative where we did not follow standard engineering practices. I understand the liability for the city, but what's the liability for our engineer who stamped it?
Well, quite honestly, I believe to stamp with a PE, a professional engineer, for them to approve a set of plans, we would not approve a set of plans that were in violation of their professional standards. We could not. It would be unfair to put any employee in that position, to ask them, to instruct them to approve something that professionally they cannot certify. No one could be put in that position, whether it's a building official or a PE. Within right, they would refuse to sign off because they jeopardize their license. If they do that, they actually then jeopardize their license.
And council could be held liable also, couldn't they?
If we knowingly do something that would be contrary to accepted practice. Now, I'm not aware that we're in that territory here. I don't think that we're in that territory. But we want to be careful that when we do it based on desire versus some accepted principle of traffic calming, something that is accepted within the industry standards that would solve a problem.
And the kind of things we've got now are either similar or basically the same as what you would find in the traffic engineering manuals. Other communities have adopted similar policies and so on and so forth. So these criteria would be plugged into that accepted practice category, which is where you should be.
Well, I think the object, is to make the streets safe, and also you certainly, if you're jeopardizing the driver of the vehicle too, then that could cause more severity to not only someone on the street, but also to the driver and other property. So definitely you would want to keep it in the guidelines as far as the speed cushions and humps and stuff are concerned.
Mr. Holloman is absolutely correct. It is your policy.
Yeah.
What we've provided to you are recommendations. If there are amendments to that policy, then we will enforce the policy that you adopt.
Did you happen to bring those numbers with you from my survey for my subdivision over there?
No, I didn't.
You didn't? Okay. I was looking for the email, but I think I remember the numbers.
Council, this is a resolution. It only requires one reading. We will proceed at your directive.
Do we want to do anything about the number of vehicles? Is that going to make a conflict with safety concerns or anything of that nature as far as...
I defer to Don.
The volume is
of
certainly at your discretion.
Yeah. Well, does anyone have a suggestion whether
I'd like to see
200, 250?
200 vehicles a day.
This is your policy.
Yeah. Well, that'd be nice.
If that's acceptable, that's...
Where did we come up with the 400 number? Where did that come from? That's
Well,
just-
as I said, looking at many policies, a lot of them have a similar number. They start at about 700 or 800, and generally the low end is about 5. I selected 4 because we had some similar comments.
Right.
Yeah,
Well, I'm just
no matter what
glad you
number we
volunteered.
kind of put out there, it seemed to be too.
And if you
much.
want to if you want to try to size that number, your standard traffic generation rate that ITE puts out is 10 cars per house per day. So 400 is 40, is a 40 home subdivision. And it just, it's to try to put a generic number. 200 would be a 20 home subdivision. Now, we also put in, the other things, the distance apart things, there's some minimum street lengths that then become part of that equation when you put all of that in. If you get down just so low, you're talking about just 1 or 2 or 3, a few houses, you may not meet the distance criteria there.
Well, if we can do it with the 200, I would be happy with that.
It's your policy.
Yeah.
The rest of the policy is pretty simple.
Yeah, I do want to at least make this point, is what you ask of your staff is to render you professional opinion. That's the policy you have in front of you. Amendments to that, to change that, we accept that, it's your policy, and we'll do that. But the number isn't arbitrary. There's basis for that number. Will it create safety problems? Probably not. But you certainly are going to probably be in a position that you're going to be using equal amounts of resources in much less traveled areas. And it is going to be a finite amount of resource. And use it. Our opinion would be that you would want to use that where you can get the greatest effectiveness. And that's the reason for trying to designate areas that would have a volume consistent with trying to use those resources in that location. If it's 400 or 300 or 200, or you take it out completely, it's your policy.
Well, like 200 though.
I think the volume number, like you say, indicates that there is an issue, and if you go down too low, then is there really an issue that needs to be addressed?
Well, that's why I'm saying 200, because I don't think that's too low.
Well,
But
see,
what is that based on?
I do.
What's the 400 based on?
He just said it was based on other...
It's based on other communities, but each community is different, and he just said too that each policy is different and each community is different.
However, that I understand what you're
I mean,
saying,
why not put it at 1,000 or put it somewhere where you
but because our resources, like Mr. Greer said, are finite, so we want to get the biggest bang for the buck. Because if you have 2% of the vehicles exceeding the speed limit in a very significant way, where you only have, let's see, 400 and what is that, 12,000 trips in a month? Is that right? 12,000 versus 2% that's exceeding the speed limit on a street that has 70,000 vehicles. We can use that number of trips to say, okay, although it may be we've got people speeding over here on Street A, and it only has 12,000 trips, but you've got a street over here that's 70,000. In my opinion, you go with the street with the more trips, and that's why that number you put it in there. If resources were, if dollars were not an issue, then you wouldn't even put trips on there. You do.
Well, the streets that are like that in our communities, we're not going to be putting those speed bumps on anyway. Because, I mean, there ain't too many streets in the communities that we got that carry 70,000.
I didn't think Cannon Avenue had a
I mean,
I bet you Arlington does.
it's a state road though, so we can't do nothing with that.
But we've got Snow Street, we've got, I mean, all these, and it's like Forest. I bet you're gonna be surprised about the number of cars that you're gonna find on.
Well, I'm pretty sure I get 200 cars a day. I don't know about 400. I ain't gonna vote for something I know.
But it's all based on.
I need this speed bump so for my neighborhood. I ain't voting for something that I know I ain't gonna, you know, if I knew that I had 400 cars, I'd go with 400. I don't know if I got 400 cars. I ain't gonna
I admire your honesty.
I mean, I'm fighting for, you know, I mean, they gonna look at me like, you did that? No, I didn't.
Mr. Holloman, I'm not sure that I see, or in regards to this question about resources and funding and how we'll do this, what criteria are we going to, I mean, is this going to be first come, first served? Is this going to be a ranking service? Is this going to be, I mean, if we've got 3 to 5 years worth of requests, how do we determine when they're done? I mean, we obviously are going to have a limited amount of money to spend each year, and if we're at 200 cars a day and we've got, 50 requests, we've got 10 years worth of speed bumps to put in. How do we determine which ones get them first?
In the section that we put in for funding, we indicated it will be done first come, first served with available funding.
And then also the neighborhoods that, if the funds are delinquished, then the neighborhoods would have the right to vote within themselves to pay.
For those that meet your criteria, if funds are not available, then they are allowed to fund it themselves. But we would still do the installation.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Are speed bumps eligible for CDBG funding too?
There are communities that have used CDBG funding for that because you can use infrastructure. The budget that we've recently approved and sent back to GCRA did not do that, so you're at minimum you're July 1 of 2014 before you would be eligible to even consider doing that. Historically, Greer has elected to keep CDBG dollars in housing and not in infrastructure relative to this type of work. But eligibility, we believe that there are portions of the CDBG funds that can be used on the streets.
In any neighborhood?
No.
No, they have to be used in low to moderate income. As established by census tract, correct, Mr. Sam?
Correct.
Yeah.
Do we need to come to an agreement on the number of cars before we vote on anything, or what do we do?
We need an amendment on the
Because
floor.
I am so excited that we have a speed bump policy coming forth that I don't want anything to happen to it, so I'm trying to safeguard that. But I just like to have something in writing that when people ask, they say, here it is, we have a policy, not that we don't have a policy. Yeah, so.
Well, based on, we've asked staff to come up with guidelines, and in the past, our staff has done a super job, and that's what we approve their salaries for. And based on that, I would make the motion that we accept this policy or resolution as written.
Well, I'll amend it to 200 cars.
That was it. At this point, we've got a motion to accept as recommended. Do we hear a second on that?
Second.
We've got a motion and a second for the resolution as it is written at this point in time. Further discussion?
Yeah, what happens if it doesn't pass? That's my question. I mean, if not accepted as written, what happens? Since it's a policy, is it just readdressed, or is it dead for a year as the smoking thing was dead for a year, or what?
If it doesn't pass, it must sit for 1 year.
Well, I don't want it to sit for a year. I want a policy in the city governing the speed bumps. And I hope that maybe, what if we, okay, we said 4, maybe we can compromise. We said 2, maybe we can compromise 3. I mean,
Just as a point of order, if I may, as a point of order, the question was, can an amendment be made? As I understand Robert's Rules of Order, our procedure would be that if there is a motion to amend, then the motion to amend must be considered first.
Well, I'm going to ask him to, we're going to do a compromise and he's going to amend his motion.
Let's hold on. Okay.
So we're going to go through all that.
This is a traffic calming policy. I think setting that minimum indicates that there's actually traffic enough to calm. So I think if you take that out of the policy,
No, we're not taking that. We're not taking that out. We just want to, we're going to compromise on the number. We're not going to take it out. No, I agree with you. To take it out would be, that'd be just like not having it at all. But we just want to compromise on the number.
What if Ford paid out 190 trips?
Okay, all right, let's deal with what we got at hand. Let's deal with what we've got at hand. We've got the motion and the second that's on the floor, but as a matter of procedure.
There has been no motion to amend. So I was clarifying if. There has been no motion to amend. The only motion on your floor is to adopt as presented. That's the only motion that's been made.
Okay. There is a motion on the floor to accept, there's a motion and a second on the floor to accept as written. If there is a motion to amend, it would be voted on first.
Yes, sir.
Is there a motion to amend?
Well, I'll make a motion to amend it to 300.
I second that.
But I want, in that motion to amend, I want him to be able to, you know how we rank the streets now and they decide which ones the speed bumps and that go in first. I'd like for him to do that too, so that it's not political, you know, that we get the, yeah. Well, I'll make sure that we get it right. Now, you know, I was the first one to get ranking them streets the other because I wanted mine, but he's done a good job, and I'm okay with that, and I think he'll do a good job on the speed bumps in too, so that's fine. So that we make sure that the dollars we spend go in the right place, and I can wait.
I'm not trying to do that, but
The issue we would have to, for us to rank or rate, it would have to be based on an application being made and then us rating or ranking those applications received. What we could do is an annual application, and of the annual applications, all of those could be rated and ranked and presented to council, and council will either approve or amend. That's how we do our streets.
Yeah.
We do it once a year. We bring you the list, and you either accept it or you amend it, and that's how we move forward. Is that feasible?
does that mean we're going to take all applications for a year?
Well, not for a year.
I mean, during a 12-month period?
I think it would have to be over a period. Now, whether that period
Probably,
is...
if we were going to do that, it would be better to do it quarterly.
Maybe quarterly. And then we would consider those that have been submitted.
Take everything from one date to another, process them as however it falls out, and those that meet, we would then rank on some basis.
And what we know by communicating with other communities that have dealt with these types of policies, that the highest interest is going to be initial. Down the road, this isn't an issue in communities that have these policies. It's the initial rollout is where you get the greatest interest.
Well, are you saying to put a time period in there, like you collect them for
Well, I mean,
6 months or 4 months or whatever?
Well, the problem is, you can't rate and rank if you only have 2 or 1. I mean...
I felt like they should be presented as a...
Now, the policy says first come, first served.
Right.
That's,
yeah.
I mean, but if we are to
But if you got
rate
3
and rank...
at the same time, the same day, whatever. I mean, if you're going to put a time on it, but if you got 3 at the same time, then maybe you regulate the...
We can do that. And I think what we want to be careful, what we don't want to get confused with is that the issue of first come, first serve is for funding. It's first come, first serve for funding. We run out of funding, there are no more to do.
Right. Unless someone pays.
And that was the reason for established criteria, because it simply said if you meet the criteria, they don't need to be rated or ranked. They meet it. Yes, pass, fail.
Right.
It meets the criteria, it goes in, if there's funding available, it gets done. If there's no funding available, it goes on the list, and it works its way up over time as funding is made available. I mean, if it meets the criteria, it meets the criteria. Not, these aren't a condition issue, not like a street. We're scoring a street based on their condition. This isn't a scale where we say it needs it. For example, 70,000 cars a day would score higher than 400 or 300 if you were doing it in some type of basis like that. But that is not we brought you a 27-page proposal, and what we heard you say was we don't want all of that. Give us something simple, so we brought back a 3-page.
Well, I like this. I think it's simple. I think it's easy reading, and the only thing, there was a concern was for the smaller residential subdivisions that might not meet that 400. But like you said, it may be the fact that people go in and out of their house more than you realize that they do.
I hear exactly what you're saying, and I don't disagree with that in any regard. I would like to be able to give some professional opinion from an engineering perspective to greatest need, or greatest risk, or highest threat to public safety. Absolutely. But my fear is that the policy that we have in front of us doesn't really allow for that type of scoring.
Well, if I understand Mr. Griffin's amendment, if it's dropped to a lower traffic count, that becomes a floor.
Correct.
Anything below that
would not be considered because it doesn't meet the criteria.
So if you had a 300 count versus a 500 count, the 500 count is scored higher because the probability, along with the traffic study, if you have a greater number of speeders on the 500 count, then the probability of something bad happening is going to be greatest on the higher count. And that, to me, is how you rate it.
We could do that if we include that in the criteria that simply says that we rate that based on the traffic volume.
And that's what I understand.
Higher the volume, the higher the ranking.
We take out first come, first serve.
It takes out first come,
first serve.
It does. And then
But that harkens back to Judy's idea of how long do we do it quarterly? Do we do it annually? How often do we do it? I mean, if she's got communities that are ready to go and they want to pay their money, do we not rank them at all? I mean, do we go ahead and do all that?
Let me suggest that we said if we're going to rank them, we need to get some in hand in order to rank them. And we suggested maybe a quarter would be a way to do that. After this gets rolled out, philosophically, I would expect we get maybe several to begin with. Maybe not, I don't know. But let's assume we get more than one on a single day, then we certainly can rate those. We don't have to make it quarterly. We can make it as we get them on a daily basis.
No, I would think that's the way it should be.
But beyond that, we get back to having to go to some specific time frame.
this may help you in your consideration. I'm going to jump ahead. In the budget that we will consider, I am recommending to you a funding level of $50,000 for traffic calming. If that is adopted in your budget, you're looking at approximately 25 single
25.
homes.
Maybe at 25, is that what you said?
Single humps. If you have a street that needs 1 or 2 or 5, it's a total of 25 because they're about $2,000. Correct?
Well, I would say 20 to 25.
20 to
range,
25,
so that
exactly. I mean,
once we determine exactly what-
and that's funding at $50,000.
Okay.
Depending on your perception, is 25 a lot? Is 20 to 25 a lot or a few? But it's, but
We'll find out.
we'll find out. For clarification, Mayor, it may be appropriate that we would withdraw the motion and have the motion submitted as desired. Now, unless Mr. Airwood's intent is for the motion to be for the policy as it is written, we then would be dealing with an amendment. There was a motion made, but not a second to amend to 300.
I second.
I'm sorry. So there's a motion, and if that's how, so that would be, and that's all you're dealing with is the number, to amend the number. And then you would vote on the original motion to approve it as amended.
So we don't have any action in regards to the ranking, though, at this point?
That is correct. Unless that it's offered.
Yeah, but they seem...
Basically, as it's written, first come, first served. That it's come in and your study's done, and then the next person that comes in, their study's done, and
I think what Jay said a minute ago brings up a good point, is that, you know, if you have a higher traffic count and higher speeds, I mean, there's almost got to be some kind of formula that you can plug these things into and give them some type of ranking. Because there is, $50,000 is not going to go a long way, and we've got to determine where these resources need to be allocated. And I don't know that it's...
Initially, may I offer this? Initially, would we allow for applications to the policy, that we would inform the public that we would receive applications for consideration July 1st to December 31st. You have a 6-month window for folks to apply. Allow our engineering department to take those applications, review those, score those based on volume, because that's the only criteria that we've mentioned. Then we could then come back and say we received 30 requests and we think we can fund 22 of those, and this is the ranking. Or we received 15 requests and we can fund them all, or any combination of that. But for us to be able to rate or rank, there has to be a group of applications for those to be considered, versus on a case by, because otherwise it is indeed first come, first served. You meet the criteria, we approve it.
well, we also need to remember that they also have to have a 65% of the residents in the neighborhood. Was that what it was, or 75?
85%.
65. I think it was
65.
65.
If you've met the criteria.
If you've met the criteria, yeah.
Oh, I got that.
Okay, then the motion on the floor with the second is to approve an amendment to the resolution that would drop the number from 400 cars per day to 300 cars per day. It's a motion by Mr. Griffin, second by Councilwoman Howard. That is the motion that is on the floor presently. That will come, of course, for a vote.
I'm completely confused. I had a motion. I made the motion to approve it as written. We had a second. Mr. Griffin came back with a motion to amend. That gained a second. So
according to Robert's Rules of Order, we will do that motion first. If it passes...
The amendment.
Yes.
Okay.
If that amendment passes, then we vote on the resolution as amended. If that motion, if that amendment fails, then we still vote on the resolution as proposed.
Correct. Correct.
Would Mr. Griffin please repeat his amendment? So I can be clear.
Well, the amendment was for 300 and then to do a ranking system.
Wait,
he said...
I don't know that we had the ranking system in
Well,
it.
I thought Mr.
originally-
Driggers, and the last thing Mr. Driggers said that we could take the applications from July to December and then rank them accordingly.
Well, that's 5 months that somebody's sitting there. I mean, it seems that sometimes before you got into all the expense of doing the studies and all, that maybe the vote on the street might be the first way to go to find out if they're going to want that or not, you know? Because you do have to have that large percentage.
I'm going to tell you, if we don't take as much political issue out of putting in traffic calming devices, we will be talking about traffic calming devices like we did in years past about paving streets. We've got to find a way to rank them. And one of the ways to rank them is you set a floor, the number of trips, and then, or the number of automobiles, and then if you're going to rank it with the study from the police department, which says you've got so many cars in there in a particular given time, and they are driving a particular rate, all right, well, how many of those are driving over the posted speed limit and how far over the posted speed limit? And all that's real simple information to gather. I mean, it's all, you know, they put their stuff out there, bam, it's done. And so I think that's the way you have to rank it. But if we don't, what's going to happen is in my opinion, is we will budget $50,000, and we may have 2 or 3 neighborhoods who have the resources to say, well, we need 35. But of course that exhausts all of the resources. But we have the ability to pay for the additional humps, and they all go to just a couple. And maybe they met the floor, but then you've got an area across the city where the residents don't have the means to do that. And they have a worse case, they have a scenario worse than those other neighborhoods. So I think that's why, if we don't accept it as written, that we have to accept it with an amendment which provides a system to rank it so it gets us 7 pulled back as far as we can. Not saying we don't have any influence, because we can have influence. We all know that. But if we have staff, very capable staff, who have the ability to rank it and to give the most benefit for everyone. And that's my opinion, and I think that's why I think there's got to be a ranking system instead of, here's a pot of money, the first one to the pot gets to draw off of it, then the second one, and the third one. I don't think that's a good scenario. Now that's me.
All right, and what we're going to have to do is we'll come back to that. But part of the problem, Jay, is you endorsed the resolution as written, which included a first come, first served.
That's exactly right, but it had higher traffic count.
Okay, all right, okay. Do you have written do you have any indication of what was the amendment? Does it include?
300 cars is what?
300 cars.
To amend to 300 cars.
But we do not have in there a recommendation for a ranking system in the amendment at this point in time. Do we not? Or do we?
I did.
That's not what got a second.
Okay.
It is what Mr. Griffin is indicating is his desire, and what would have to happen is the person who second would have to agree to that, or someone has to second that. Because that was not in the original motion to amend, and it received a second. And the only way to add that is that it needs to be either agreeable to the second, or someone else has to second that.
I'm going to tell you what we've done, and Judy hit the nail on the head just a minute ago. We have complicated this thing to the point that I cannot support it at all. I mean, I'm just going to tell you right now, as good as it was when we started with this, I'm not going to support it at this point in time, because I think we've fiddled and fooled with it to the point that we've got it so confusing and so convoluted and so biased in terms of how we're going to deal with it. I don't think there's any defense on our part for what we're talking about doing tonight. We've got an amendment on the floor with a second to reduce the number from 400 to 300. Do you want to withdraw your second to allow Mr. Griffin to offer that we add a ranking system to that?
My biggest problem, and I'm sorry because I don't want to continually drag this out because I know we got another meeting after this, but my biggest problem is that when somebody in January hands you a request, I mean, is it going to be June before they know where they stand? I mean, is the study not, do you not go ahead and do the study, start it, or what would happen on that? I mean, do you take your over from January to June, and then at June you look at 6, 5, whatever, 10 applications or subdivisions, and then you start it? I mean, is it that long wait period before you do anything? I think that's the thing.
So you raise a very important point, and I do think it's important for us to recognize is that, Mr. I can't agree with you more, Mr. I agree. I mean, absolutely do agree that there needs to be some system of saying where's the greatest need. I do hear that. But one of the problems that we also have is that if the window is open for all folks that want to be considered, we may know that we have funding for 20 or 25 single humps citywide. And if we have an open window 3, 4, 5, 6 months, what if we get requests for 150? We're all over the city doing studies and to do work that we know we don't have resources to do.
And that's why we do an annual paving program, and we roll that program up.
And that could be the case. It could very well be that if we get that many requests, they simply get queued, and we keep working until we get to it.
Okay. The amendment before us with a second on the floor is to reduce the number from 400 to 300. We will vote on that first without, Ms. Pierce, without a method for ranking in that. We're simply dealing with moving the number from 400 to 300 in the amendment before us. That's the first thing that we will vote on. Is that clear to everybody? Moving from 400 to 300 on the amendment that's before us. Last comments.
What's the second thing we vote on?
After that, we'll deal with the motion that you've made to accept it as is. Unless the motion to amend passes, then that motion will supersede the resolution as written. The number would be changed in it. Clear? I know.
300 car.
Ms. Adams?
300 car amendment.
300 car amendment. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Airwood.
No.
Mr. Griffin.
Yes.
Ms. Bookert.
Yes.
Mr. Dumas.
No.
Mr. Bettis.
Yes.
Ms. Albert.
Yes.
Mayor Danner.
No. Passes 4 to 3, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. The amendment passes. The motion that was made to adopt first reading of annexation ordinance.
720.
Excuse me. I was on the wrong thing there. First and final reading of resolution 7-2013. There has been a motion, and do we have a second on that?
Yes, Mr. Dumas was the second.
On the motion that
On the-
Councilman Arrowood made to accept this as written is now amended to 300 cars as opposed to 400 cars. Correct? Okay. So the motion before us and the second is a resolution to adopt City of Greer traffic calming policy as written with an amendment that there be a change made to the number of cars to trigger the study and be 300 as opposed to 400. Clear? And it is as, and we are still, at this point, first come, first served.
Unless you amend your motion.
Now, can he amend it, or can I?
He can amend his own motion.
I would like to amend my motion to accept the resolution as written, but to add a means to rank the need for traffic calming devices.
Okay, one more time.
I amend my motion to accept the resolution as written with the 300 car count, but to add a means to rank the need for traffic calming devices.
That will require a second, Councilman Dumas. Second. Of the amended.
Second.
Okay. All right, we have a amended motion and amended second at this point to accept Resolution 7-2013 as amended with an amendment to add a ranking system. All right, motion and a second in that regard. All right, the floor is open for discussion or questions about the pending motion that is on the floor. First and final reading of Resolution 7-213, which is to accept the amended resolution reducing the number from 400 to 300 and adding an amendment to add a ranking system. That's where we are now.
We just need for clarification to administer the policy, what that would be.
I mean, is a month, what you receive that month, could that not be reviewed at the end? We're acting like we're probably going to, and I really don't expect, a landslide of subdivisions requesting speed humps. Nobody really likes them. I don't like them, but they are a safety precaution, especially with kids on their bicycles and especially with summer coming up. If it could be done on a monthly basis, the requests that have come in, rather than waiting 5-6 months.
Whatever, we just need to know what that expectation would be.
We can do it any way. The easiest way to do it is on the volume of traffic, and then whatever time period you want to put on. That's the most straightforward.
Anybody else?
I understand the point that you're trying to make, Ms. Albert, but if you do it monthly, what's the difference between doing that and first come, first serve?
First come, first serve is fine with me, but if they're wanting a ranking.
That's the point.
Yeah.
If you're getting one a month, what are you comparing it against?
Well, you got that one a month to deal with.
To do a ranking, you have to have more than one to consider. So if one's all he gets that month,
it's number one.
It's number one.
And if nobody cared enough to put in a request,
if the next month you get two, do you disqualify one of those, or do you do them both? What is the
Well,
ranking?
I know you already
Because
decided one that was
essentially, if you approve both
higher
of them,
number.
it's still first come, first served until you get to the end of however many you're going to
Yeah.
fund.
It's never a problem till you run out of funding.
That's the exact problem.
And there again, neighborhoods are given the option to fund if they meet the
Right.
criteria. Just for purposes of maybe getting this a lot further along, one of the programs we looked at was the one from Texas that Councilwoman Albert proposed. As I was reviewing that information, I saw that was published in 1999. Contacted the city and said, well, how many have you done since 1999? That criteria. That's 13 years, 12 years, 13 years. They did 3. I don't know how many we'll get. You all have a feeling for your communities, your neighborhoods, and what you think you'll get.
It's not gonna be as many as everybody thinks.
I don't know.
I don't think so either.
You know, I don't know.
That's why I don't think it's really gonna matter.
To really rank
It's not gonna be that,
on
it's gonna be the initial, and after the initial, it's not gonna be that everybody comes in and
Right.
just says, I
And
want this.
when
So
you
I don't
get
think
the-
that's gonna be a problem, but I do agree with what he says, we need to have some type of system where even when we're not in these chairs, it's not political, you know, because we went through that political thing with the roads, and trust me, it's better the way we do it now. It really is, because I mean, there was a whole lot of arguing that and leaving it to the professionals and letting them do as served us well on the streets. And I think that doing speed bumps, I agree with Councilman Airwood that would serve us well also.
Okay, if we're going to leave it to the professionals, then what would be your recommendation done on a ranking time period?
On the time period? Yeah, there again, I don't know that anyone is significantly better than the other. When we have a request that comes in, let's say our criteria is you got to have 5 residences of any community represented. Once that happens, then we collect traffic data. We collect traffic data for a week. It will take some period of time to process the first, say, 5 that come in.
And then you got to go back and get the vote from the people on that street, right?
Exactly.
So, you know.
I think quarterly makes sense from that viewpoint. There again, we may well be subject to the circumstance that we only get 1 a quarter, so the ranking becomes somewhat. But we certainly can do it, and it's just not a problem to add that in the process. If we don't have enough to really make sense of a ranking, then it doesn't really matter. I mean, if they all meet criteria, and if we got enough money to deal with it, then it becomes almost irrelevant.
Well, quarterly certainly makes more sense than every 6 months or every year.
That's still first come, first served. Because at the end of the first quarter, you're going to approve however many you've got up until whatever amount of money you've got. And once the money's gone, then you're done with it. So it's still first come, first served, first quarter, second, third quarter, fourth quarter, until you run out of money. When you run out of money determines whether or not it's a ranking system or not. I just raised that as a point. I mean, you know, if you're gonna rank all of them, you've got to gather all of them that are submitted for a period of time, knowing that it's going to exceed requests, or exceed funding.
But then you go for 6 months or a year, and you've got 1 request, 2, 3 requests sitting there waiting a whole year or 6 months.
I understand your point exactly, but I think the whole idea is that even if you are reviewing them, the criteria is that when you run out of money, then the program ends at that particular point for that particular year. That's still first come, first served, regardless of how you're doing it.
I kind of put speed humps and road paving in 2 different categories. Because I know y'all have related a lot of this back to the fact that repaving the streets went into a grading, ranking, grading, whatever type system. but even though the speed humps are going on the streets, I really do not see where street paving and speed humps to reduce the speed of traffic to protect the pedestrians or protect the children that happen to be riding their bikes or throwing a football and it happens to go out in the street, or whatever they may be doing, or someone walking their dog down the street and, a car about runs over them. So to me, that's something entirely different than from paving the street.
Mr. Erwin, do you want to offer a time frame for the ranking system?
3 months.
3 months.
We gather applications in a 3-month period because it's like anything, you got to start.
Okay.
And then once we start, if those applications exceed the budgeted amount for a year's time, then they roll over to the next budget cycle. But they're competing with.
So we are considering applications on a quarterly basis is basically what we're doing.
And we would rank based on traffic volume, correct? That's the criteria for ranking. They have to meet all the other criteria, but the ranking is based on traffic volume.
But what determines whether you accept it or not?
That's all spelled out.
No, but I mean, it comes down to funding, does it not? I mean, if you get 5 requests, how many of them are you going to fund if they all meet the criteria?
That's why it's ranked. That's why.
But if you got enough money to do all 5,
you're going to do all 5. It's just like.
So why is that any different than first come, first served?
Because if we're talking about traffic calming devices on a particular street. You may have a street that is a different length. Street A is 1,000, 2,000 feet. Street B is only 1,000 feet. So it's going to take less devices over here, but you're going to spend, you'll spend more money on the longest street. So you may, this street meets the qualifications, it's ranked higher, or number 1, and then you run out of money over here, and then you can't move over here to this other, to the next budget cycle.
I'm with you on that, but I mean, let's say in the first quarter, you get 3 applications, and that's going to be 15 total speed humps. Why are we going to rank them? We can do 25.
Well, the only reason you at that point is to rank them is to make sure they meet the minimum guidelines.
So the only reason that we would ever rank them is when we don't have enough money to do all of them.
No. You would do it for that purpose, but you also would do it when you have more requests than you do dollars, to say this is number 1, this is number 2, this is number 3, this is 4, this is 5. We've run out of money on 4. So, so 5 is either going to have to reapply or they just roll over to the next budget cycle. If I'm wrong in my logic, please tell me, but I
don't understand how it's any different than first come, first served. If you know when you get to the end of the dollars, if you've approved everything up until that point, then I don't know that there's a necessity.
I'll tell you why. The street that you and I are familiar with, I would say if it was just a city street, that it would outrank a street in a regular subdivision where there is no cut through. But that this one particular street that you and I are familiar with, we just got the information on it. But there's a neighborhood that's been asking for them for a while, and they've already put their dollars in. Now, do you want to spend your dollars on a neighborhood that the probability that someone gets hurt is much less than a street that's carrying 70,000 automobiles?
Okay, so you're talking about the ranking system applies every quarter.
Yes.
Okay, I get your point now. All right. All right, this is Resolution 7-2013, which we are voting on to accept as amended from 400 cars to 300 cars and to add a quarterly ranking system based on funding. Is that where we are? All right. Everybody clear on the amended resolution as is before us? Any final comments or questions in regards to Resolution 7-2013?
What a great country we live in. Nobody gets everything they want. We just have to hatch it out.
Ms. Adams?
Mr. Airwood?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Ms. Bookert?
Yes.
Mr. Dumas?
Yes.
Mr. Pettis?
Yes.
Ms. Albert?
Yes.
Mayor Danner?
No. Council, we have no items for executive session this evening. Having no items to consider in executive session, we stand adjourned from our regular scheduled meeting. We will take about a 5-minute break and then we'll go into workshop. All right, let me call the workshop to order. With that, I'll turn it over to staff.
We have, with council's permission, I'll present from here. If you need me to go to the podium, I'll certainly be glad to. We have distributed to you copies of all of our budgets, general fund and all special funds. What we would propose that we would do this evening, because we are in workshop setting, we would propose that I take the opportunity to review with you at a higher level the transmittal letter, giving an overview of the budget process, our funding, where we are. And then what we would like to ask of you is next steps, whether or not we would like to come in a workshop setting, possibly 1 week from tonight, whether we would do that in a workshop setting 2 weeks from tonight. But as you'll see in the transmittal letter, we are proposing that we would do first reading at our first meeting in June, public hearing, and second reading at that second meeting in June, giving us really the longest period we've ever used in evaluating and reviewing the budget. So again, we will do that as you see fit. If I can, the budget documents that you have are really for you to take with you this evening and to peruse and to look through those. If I could indulge you to allow me to review the transmittal, I will not do that in its entirety. It certainly isn't my intent to read that to you, but I do think there are portions of this that we certainly need to review. So obviously, in accordance with both state statute and with our city ordinances, I am providing to you the general operating fund, and you can see that it's Fund 11. But we're also looking at the Recreation Program Fund, the Lease Purchase Capital Improvements Fund, the Debt Service Fund, Hospitality Taxes Fund, the Stormwater Fund, Real Property Fund, Public Services 40% Fund, the Facilities Use Fund, and our Road Paving Fund. You can see in the transmittal letter corresponding fund numbers as well as the revenue and expenditures for each of those funds. In order of what you have presented, you have in front of you first, as far as the budgets, Fund 11, the general fund, and then the others are in numerical order, first being 09, 10, 12, 18, 19, 23, 33, 50, and 60 respectively. So that's the order that they should be in for you as well. These budgets would be effective July 1st, 2013 through June 30th, 2014. And again, based on state statute and our own ordinances, the budgets are balanced. These budgets do not require any adjustments or recommendations for adjustments to millage rate, nor are there adjustments to any of our fees associated with generating revenue for the budget. We are now in our 4th year of looking at a financial recovery plan. Part of that has been for us to really look at efficiencies, technologies that we can use to improve our efficiencies, and of course looking for innovations in our budget process as well. The priorities that are identified in this budget come from our comprehensive plan, from our strategic plan, and from the workshop that we do annually, the City Council strategic planning session that we do on an annual basis as well. The feedback that you've provided us through those documents, again, comprehensive plan, strategic plan, and your planning session, has been really the basis of developing this budget. There is a strategic methodology there. We review the budget on a line item by line item basis. There is an increase in the budget of $429,402 over the prior year budget. That reflects a 2.37% increase from the current year's operations. 97.8 mills is our current millage rate, again recommending that we would stay at that existing rate. 11.69 mills are required for debt service. That is a decrease to overall debt. And then 86.11 mills being applied to general operations. We've had a slight increase in the value of a mill. That mill is valued at $95,542 based on our expected ad valorem tax collections. The 2.37% increase we believe is modest. It is about 0.5% less than what we were increasing our budget by last year, and then another 1.5% from last year, and 0.5% from the year prior to that. If you adjust the budget for what's being recommended for some capital expenditures, general operating expenses for this budget is at a 1.3% increase. The overall budget represents the 2.37, but we'll demonstrate why some of those capital expenditures are bringing that up a little bit. But increased cost for personnel services, increased cost for operations, increased cost for debt, whatever those are applied less the capital improvements that are being funded through the budget, again, represents 1.3% increase. And we do believe that that is significant. Continue to operate at a level lower than we were in 2008, 2009. I want to spend a little time talking with you about the impact and how we are dealing with allocations in this budget relative to our employees. You'll see that I have here that I am referencing, and I do believe this, that our employees are our most valuable resource, and they are indeed our most effective tool in managing our resources. We are a personnel-driven organization. As a service organization, it takes people and equipment to provide those public services that are out there. Training and emphasis on quality customer service has become a part of our culture here at the city, and our employees have done an excellent job of embracing that and bringing good ideas to the table on how we can be more effective, getting more out of each dollar that we spend. Our community survey indicates that we have excellent citizen support for our employees and the job that they are providing and the services that our community is receiving. One of the concerns that I've had in preparing this budget is that we, like a lot of folks, this is not unique to us as a city, it's not unique to us as local government, it's not unique to employers in general. It has been very difficult for employers to maintain salaries at a level consistent with inflationary rates. And we are no exception to that. We are very much like many other businesses and entities that are out there. But we do strive to keep up with inflation, at least from a perspective of cost of living for our employees. In this budget, I am proposing that there are sufficient finances for us to fund a merit increase for our employees at a rate of 2.5%. Again, that would be a merit-based increase, not to exceed 2.5% of their current salaries. We did that. We've done that now in most of our past increases for our employees, that we are restricting those to a merit-based increase. The budget that you have before you allows for an appropriation for that 2.5% increase. I am recommending that we consider implementing a bonus pool program for our employees, but it's unlike one that we've ever done before. It is performance-based, and I feel very strongly that any type of a bonus pool should be based on performance. That performance being, are we able to manage our expenses relative to our revenues? If that can be achieved, I'm recommending that we would create a pool that would be up to, not exceeding 2% of the total allocation of our salaries. Now, that doesn't mean that an employee would get a 2% increase. What that means is that we put 2% aside, up to 2%. For us, that's about, David, $145,000 is about what that equals. I would propose that that money that's set aside in that pool would then be divided among our employees, not on an equal share basis, but based on a tenure basis, a longevity bonus, rewarding those employees that have been with us the longest length of time at the greatest level. It does have a floor or a base, and that is equivalent to what we have been able to reward to our employees through our gift card program that we do at Christmas time. $50 for our part-time employees and $100 for our full-time employees would be the base. That would be the floor. And then again, based on seniority, in a distribution method that could be 2%, again, it may be 1%. It may be 0.5%. It would never exceed the 2%, but it could be $10,000. It could be $30,000. It could be $100,000. It could be the $145,000, but it would cap at the 2%. But if we do reach the 2% and we have the resources to do that, this type of distribution program would basically reward an employee at a level of about $100 per year of service. Therefore, a 20-year veteran that's performing well and is getting good performance reviews, again, everything is always based on performance. Those employees that are performing well and are meeting expectations in a fully funded program, a 20-year employee would get about a $2,000 bonus. A 3-year employee would get about a $300 bonus. A 10-year employee would get about a $1,000 bonus. It doesn't follow that dollar for dollar, but it generally would follow that. So half of that would be about half. If we're able to fund 1%, it would be about 1/2 of that level. 1/4%, again, you can kind of see the analogy how that would play out mathematically. I feel very strongly that a longevity bonus system is long overdue for us. It is a sound financial way for us to reward our employees that have endured the hard times, but have also benefited from the good times. It is a system that our newer employees recognize that there's opportunity for them as they would mature and grow with us as an organization. It is, as I have tested this idea with many of our employees, it has received very, very good response as an equitable, fair way for some type of a performance bonus pool to be distributed. My proposal would be that if you would consider that we would do that at our December employee appreciation breakfast that we do each year, and therefore this would be really at a time when employees could possibly use it most around the Christmas holiday season. So it's not a Christmas bonus. It is not a employee bonus. It is a performance bonus that is rewarded to an employee based on seniority with a cap. So I'd like for us to consider that as we move forward. What is important for the budget is that there are no dollars allocated to that in this budget, because it is solely based on prior year audited performance. So at the June 30th, 2013, if we have a positive year, less the amount that we already put away for fund balance replenishment, that comes off the top, and then this would be second in line behind that, up to that 2% max. It is based on the audited numbers. Therefore, we get our audited numbers around October, early November. We then would bring those audited numbers back. If the funds are available, we would dedicate those funds to the pool, and the pool would then be distributed in December. Again, this budget calls for a 2.5% increase based on merit. The pool is a separate issue based on prior year performance. And we'll certainly have lots of opportunity to discuss and to debate that as we move forward. Our salary and benefits program, I do believe, continues to be competitive. We look at that on a regular basis. We evaluate our insurance program. We evaluate our health benefit program. We look at benefits that we may provide relative to a gym membership for good health, those types of things. We still fare very, very well. We fare very competitively. I do believe that our salary structure is still competitive, but I know that we have not evaluated that for quite some time. I'm not appropriating dollars in this particular budget, but I am planting the seed with you, and I believe that we do need to plan and fund a comprehensive salary and benefit study as we would move forward into 2014 or 2015, wherever that availability would be for us. But it has been, and at that level, it will probably have been about a 15-year cycle before we have really been able to do a comprehensive review. We work very, very hard to keep our classification system and our salary structure at a level where when we are able to award cost of living increases or merit increases that are in line with the consumer price index, then we have traditionally adjusted our salary scale when that has occurred. So we don't operate off of a 15-year-old salary scale. We have regularly updated that scale over time. And again, I still feel very comfortable that we are in a competitive position today, but I do think it's appropriate that we periodically take a look at that, and that's where you're seeing that recommendation. Specific and relative to the budget as proposed, I am recommending to you the hiring of one new firefighter. 3 were requested in the budget. I am recommending to you that we would begin some process of looking to ramp that back up as we start to look at our future needs to not only replenish a position that we contractually have some obligation to with our Pelham-Batesville agreement, but also as we would continue to look at development either south of I-85 or north of the city in the Blue Ridge Plantation area up around Lake Robinson. We are several years, I'll use the word delayed, but not in that. We anticipated growth to be much greater north than it has been over the last 5, 6, 7 years, particularly because of the recession. We had original plans to build a substation in that area. We had plans to ramp up for that. It became very evident to us that that need was not there as immediate as we thought it would have been several years ago. But we do still need to look at our growth patterns north and south of the city and what requirements we may or may not have there. I am recommending in this budget one IT technician position to be funded and also a clerk in the Building and Development Standards Office. I'm recommending moving 2 existing employees from part-time status to full-time status. One of those is in our Parks and Recreation Department and another in our Public Services Department. I'm also recommending the hiring of 4 part-time positions. 2 of those are within our Police Department, one as a records clerk and one as a CID or Criminal Investigations Division clerk. One of those positions of the 4 is also in the Building and Development Standards Office to assist with our summer nuisance abatement program. We believe that we are at a point that the summer months need additional attention, and a part-time position over the summer would assist in doing that. And we're also recommending the addition of a part-time position to assist us at the Needmore Center as a recreation director leader over in that department, the recreation department. Recommending a college intern that would be hired either through the academic year or the summer, depending on when that availability would be best for us. But a college intern to assist with some very specific planning functions within the Building and Development Standards Office. This budget also then provides some funding for some increased existing part-time folks to increase some hours within the Recreation Department as well. Our Courts Department asked for some overtime hours to be appropriated. I'm recommending that those dollars be appropriated, and then I'm also making a recommendation that we make some adjustments to the hourly rate that we are paying for bench services for our municipal judge and our associate judges as well. Our employees are affected by changes in state legislation. We were aware last year because we had some increases, but our employees will be feeling that more so this year. Everyone that's enrolled in the state retirement systems will take on an additional 1% required contribution. Again, that's being paid by the employee or being withheld out of the employee's portion of their pay. 1/2 of that will take place in this fiscal year and an additional 0.5% in the next fiscal year. We will see an increase in what we're paying to police retirement. They scheduled some increases there. On the police retirement, we're increasing from 12.3 to 12.5 this year, and that will go to 13 next year. We have the funding within the appropriations of this budget to absorb the increase, the required increase to the police officers and firefighters from that 12.3 to 12.5. We are currently at 10.6 on all other employees. There's not an increase this year, but you can see that will be going to 10.9 next year as well. So we're having to prepare and ramp up for those changes in the state retirement system. More being required of us as the employer, more being required of the employee as well. One piece of good news is that for the second consecutive year, we feel that our insurance program has continued to operate financially very strong. We are continuing to see healthcare costs rise on a national basis, but as you are well aware, we manage our program through a self-funded program. We continuously put that program out for renegotiation, for rebidding on an annual basis, and by doing that and by managing our claim cost, we do not foresee that we will need to make adjustments to the premiums that we pay to ourselves for that self-insured program. We're feeling very, very good with that. We do continue to provide that insurance benefit to our employees. We pay 100% of the cost for our employees, for employee only, and then we pay 80% of the cost for family coverage. As you may be aware, we have a 4-tiered system now, and those numbers will vary just slightly, just a little bit, whether it's a employee only or employee spouse or employee full family or employee children. Right, David? That's our 4 tiers. So that can vary just slightly, but it is 100% for the employee, and we pay 80% of the family, and the employee pays the other 20%. Again, we've been able to manage those costs very, very well. We're not anticipating any additional cost there, nor are we anticipating any substantive changes to the policy, to the plan. We have a very strong, top-shelf insurance plan for our employees, and we believe that we'll be able to maintain that. From an economic development standpoint, you can see that We would continue to fund Greer Development Corporation at 7 8%, 7.125. When you go to the line item, you will see that that's a nice little bump for them this year. It has proven successful for us by putting that as a formula method. As we said, when we implemented this previously, as the city benefits, our economic development efforts benefit. If we have a very difficult year, then that is passed along to them as well. Their resource, their revenue from us is 100% consistent on what we do in local business license collections. So the health of our community is directly reflected in that number. So obviously, if they're going up, we're anticipating going up as well. That's reflective in good retail sales, good performance, industrial and commercial relative to business license. We are at the third year of a funding request through Partnership for Tomorrow. We have agreed to do some match funding with them. There's a $50,000 allocation in this budget, but it would satisfy the third year of our 3-year commitment to that community master plan. Our Public Services Fund continues to be allocated at 40% of the total operations of the department. As we review that fund, you will see that we are still anticipating there will be some shortfall in that. It has stabilized relatively well. We are recommending that as we receive our audited numbers in this fiscal year, that we would revisit that issue and that we would have some very serious conversation about path forward on the Public Service Fund. Again, no recommended changes in the fee for this year in our Public Service Fund, but we are in the third year of that, and we do believe that as that audited number completes June 30th, 2013, that we're going to need to give some very strategic review to that, and we can do that this fall as those numbers would become available to us, or certainly at the annual strategic planning session that Council conducts. Our road paving program has continued to be very successful. We have the opportunity to continue to do some match funding. As we review that fund a little bit later, you will see that by leveraging that funding, we're able to put about $100,000 from the general fund. That gets matched dollar for dollar. And then we also put 100% of the dollars that are transferred to us from Greenville County that is collected on the road maintenance fee for Greenville County. We put 100% of those dollars back in to the road paving match fund, and they get matched dollar for dollar. So for our $200,000 investment that we make, we're matched by the Legislative Delegation Transportation Committee, and we're getting about $400,000 in local street paving with those funds. That has been a tremendous opportunity for us in really doing twice the amount of road paving as we otherwise would normally be able to do. I am recommending that the total expenditure in that appropriation would be $421,150. And you can see when we get to the road paving fund exactly how that's broken out. One thing that is a bit different for us than we have done in some past years, I am recommending that $194,000 of our fund balance be appropriated for this budget, but it be restricted to capital projects only. And you'll see that those capital projects are where the $50,000 for traffic calming, $50,000 for a sidewalk repair, replacement, and construction program, $72,000 for a capital improvement project to the operations center to replace the roof on that building, and a $22,000 capital improvement allocation to construct a driveway apron to the entrance of that building to reduce the dust and debris that's getting inside the building from the vehicles that are, because as you're aware, that's a drive-in building that would assist with that. And we can talk more specifically about that as we address the general fund and how that appropriation applies there. Property tax revenue is increasing. We're projecting an increase of about 2.9%. We're looking at about 3% based on the business license side of things. That's the lion's share between property tax and business license of our increases. We are projecting that 2.9 and that 3% increase based on historical data. We are not projecting growth. We still believe that as part of our financial recovery plan, even though we're in year 4 of that plan, we still feel very strongly that we are not at the point to project growth, because the risk that we have there is over projecting. So the 3% that you're seeing there are real dollars that we believe, based on the increase in the tax value of our community, on the tax base of our community, that those dollars are realistic. We also have 3 TIF districts that the revenue that was going into restricted TIF purposes, those TIF districts are maturing, and the revenue is then being distributed to all taxing authorities, the school district, the county, and the municipality as well. So the city will be receiving some additional funds that otherwise had previously been going into those TIF districts, and those dollars are allocated here. One expense item that is pretty significant for us is that we have completed the existing COPS program that we were in. We were required by that grant to absorb 100% of the funding. So the $141,000 that we were receiving each year from the federal government, year 1, year 2, year 3, that COPS program was funded at 100%. Our requirement in that grant program is that we would keep those officers in the 4th year. This budget allocates that those positions are maintained, but the revenue resource from the grant is no longer in the budget. We no longer have that $141,000. So that certainly is a decrease that we are seeing in the budget. We are projecting or allocating a decrease to our state aid, what used to be called aid for subdivision, but our state aid number is being decreased. We were instructed by council that we wanted to wean ourselves off of the reliance on those state funds, and so we are decreasing that at a rate of 10% of the previous year's budget amount. So we are building some excess capacity because the collections on that has been greater than what we have actually budgeted, and that is partially where we are being able to recognize some capital improvement expenditures that I was talking about earlier. $50,000 for the traffic calming, $50,000 for the sidewalk, the $72,000 for the roof, and the $22,000 for the driveway apron. Though that is partially where those excess capital dollars are being channeled toward. When you look through the budget, you will notice that there are columns there that identify, and we'll give some example of this in a moment, but there's a recommended, there's a requested column, and then there's a recommended column. The requested column is what our department heads submitted to me for consideration of their budgets. The recommended column is what I am recommending to you as the city's budget for 2013-14. That required $230,511 to be removed from those requests. Each of those line items, you can see exactly where those came from across the board as you would look through the budget. But it did require an adjustment of $230,511 for us to be able to provide to you a balanced budget. We were able to do that by using a methodology called priority-based budgeting. It is a process that we look at every line item and we evaluate that line item relative to, again, the comprehensive plan, the strategic plan, and the priorities that you set forth in your strategic planning session back earlier this year. So that's how we determine where those dollars that we believe you are directing those dollars to be placed. And we do that through that process called priority-based budgeting. We're encouraging and we're asking our employees to think more strategically, and I'm recommending to you that we do that a little more with some larger projects. We've completed many of our building projects, our city hall, our policing courts, the Cannon Center, the park. Some of our larger type projects we've had great success in accomplishing those. But we have some needs in our community that need to give a little more long-term versus year-to-year single budget process thinking. Two of those that I'd like council to give some consideration to in this budget is, one, I'm asking you that you would appropriate over the next 5 years an allocation of $500,000, $500,000 to development of the Greer Station area, our C1 Central Business District downtown. I'm working with Greer Station Association and Greer Development Corporation and their staff in a 5-year plan. But what's very important here is that those dollars are our dollars. Those dollars are held by, appropriated by, and will be spent by the city of Greer. That is not a pass-through that we would provide to a third-party organization, group, or trust. We would do those through our appropriation. The way that I believe that we can structure that, you can see that I'm looking for an appropriation of $25,000 in this budget. Next year, that appropriation would go to $100,000, but remember, $50,000 will no longer be needed for Partnership for Tomorrow. We have satisfied that. So I would be recommending that next year we would transfer that $50,000 over to the Greer Station project, and that we would add an additional $25,000. So we add $25,000 this year, we would add $25,000 next year, and then in the third year we would add $25,000 a year for 3 years as a new appropriation, thus enabling us to do $25,000, $100,000, $125,000, $125,000, and $125,000 over that 5-year period, allowing us to appropriate $500,000 for very specific work in the downtown area. That work would include things like, very specifically, marketing the downtown area. Very specifically offering incentives for residential development in the downtown area. That assistance could be in the form of grant opportunities to assist with fire suppression, because that's a large expense in trying to develop second-level housing in a historic district. Those dollars could be used for, and we would suggest that they would be used for landscaping improvements in the downtown area. It very well could be used for road improvements, sidewalk improvements, streetscape improvements, but there would be a very specific, dedicated plan that you would approve, and that those dollars would be appropriated over that 5-year period. I'm also asking council to consider that we would spend $1 million on the Wade Hampton Boulevard corridor over the next 3 years, and that we would specifically spend those dollars to develop a very strategic, uniform street lighting system from city limit to city limit on the Wade Hampton corridor. It's very inconsistent today. There's no uniform pattern. There is no light output that we can measure that stays consistent through that area. We believe that it can give a true gateway appearance to entering the city, so that you know when you enter Greer and you know when you leave Greer. We are bound by Gat Creek, and we're bound by the Fairview down at the Target Shopping Center. A very long stretch of Wade Hampton Boulevard. I believe that there's the ability for us to appropriate the unused funds from the TIF district that will be closing relative to Hampton Road, and the one for Chick Springs. We'll close those TIF districts, appropriate the remaining funds specific to the areas that are inside that TIF district. I'm also recommending that we would then appropriate the balance of the funds that were originally issued as a bond for improvements on Highway 29. And then it would require over that 3-year period that we would have to fund approximately, I think it's about $226,000 over that 3-year period, and that we would determine if that appropriation is either out of fund balance or as a direct expenditure over the next 2 budget cycles. But if we know that those dollars are available to us and we can make the commitment to that, then we have the ability to make a substantial improvement to that corridor. So again, from a community development perspective, making the request that we would allocate that $500,000 to downtown and $1 million to the Wade Hampton Boulevard corridor. The first being over 5 years and the second being over that 3-year period. $1.8 million of our money comes to us from a third-party resource as far as a collection. Those are insurance and other insurance premiums and wireless technology. The telephone and wireless and those folks that are collected on our behalf by the Municipal Association. That's $1.8 million, and we don't know until the very end of the year if we're going to hit 1.8 or 1.75 or 1.86. We really never know because it's based on things that we don't know. We are projecting that based on our experience. We are not basing our projections for that number on any type of projected growth. We're staying very, very conservative in projecting those numbers on past performance, relatively over the last couple of years, that past performance. We're not aware of any issues that could be affecting that. There are no statewide lawsuits that are out there that could be affecting those dollars. That would have significant impact to us on what we expect to collect. That hasn't always been the case, but this year we're not anticipating anything that could modify that substantially. As we would work through the budgets themselves, we certainly would be in a position that we would want to identify variances to the budget, whether they're high or low. Some of those we have done tonight through the transmittal letter. But we certainly would want to do those in their entirety through particularly the general fund, and we certainly want to make sure that we would identify and review everything in the lease purchase fund as well. We will review all of those budgets, but particularly in those we want to give a little more greater detail in what's happening there. Again, what we're extremely pleased with is that it's a balanced budget. There are a number of things that we believe you've asked for us to include in the budget. We've been successful in getting those included. Everything that we would like to have seen in the budget, we have not been able to fund. But those things that are there, I am very comfortable, our finance folks are very comfortable that we are in a position that we are not hedging our expectations on revenue, nor are we under projecting what we believe our expectations would be on what it takes to operate the city for the next year through this fiscal year budget. We're very pleased with it. It does not require an increase in taxes. It requires no adjustments in fees across the board. Again, we have the remainder of this month and going into June 11th for any type of workshop and discussion of the budget. But we would ask for your consideration for first reading of the budget on June the 11th with the public hearing and second reading scheduled for June 25th. And then, of course, the budget would then be effective July 1st of 2013 to allow us to go through the fiscal year. The budgets that you have in front of you tonight, I truly am now at the point of looking for direction from you of how you would like these budgets presented. Again, we have blocked out on our calendar that we could certainly come in next Tuesday and do a very concentrated, solely for the purpose of budget workshop, to do that workshop. We are certainly prepared that we can do that in a workshop setting following your next meeting night in 2 weeks. But or you could do it tonight. It certainly wasn't our intent to do it tonight, but we're certainly prepared to do it. As you can see, our staff are with us tonight. They are most knowledgeable of this budget. But one thing that we've learned over time is that when it's balanced, that our comfort level is greater. And that's a good thing. But what we also want to make sure that we are clearly communicating is that there is not a single line item in this budget that we're not prepared to address in one form or fashion. We are familiar with every line item that's there. We encourage you to take these budgets with you tonight, review them in their entirety, and then allow us to come back and present those budgets to you so that you've had the opportunity to circle, mark, and highlight those that you may have questions about. Of course, we would certainly be prepared at that time to answer any questions as well. So I've reviewed my transmittal letter. The transmittal letter is the overview of the budget. It is the process that we are engaged in, and I now look to you for direction of how you would like for it to be detailed to you.
Council, the floor is open to ideas and discussion in that regard. We've got the possibility of potentially doing something a week from tonight or 2 weeks from tonight. So what's your pleasure?
Two weeks from
tonight. Council night.
We can certainly do that. And we're very prepared to do that. It would probably, again, depending on the questions that you have, but to present the budget probably in a time frame similar to what we've done tonight in looking at the overview of the entire process.
Other ideas?
The budget will be made available on our website starting tomorrow. It will be made available for anyone in the public to go to our website and pull it up. Hard copies will be made available to all of our departments. They'll be made available to the public in all of our offices, and hard copies made available here at City Hall as well. We think it's important for the public to be involved in this process as well. The workshop that we're conducting tonight and that we would do in 2 weeks, that will be also broadcast on our public access channel. Again, trying our best to get as much of this information out to the public as we can, encouraging public input into this process as well.
Okay. With that then, we will schedule a workshop to coincide with our next scheduled meeting, which will occur 2 weeks from tonight. That date is the 28th.
28th.
We will have another workshop at the 28th. Comments, questions from council? Speak now or forever hold your peace. I will call the workshop to a conclusion. Thank you.